welcome you into episode number 3 of the main rundown. Last week we had some technical issues going on, so we just moved it back a week. But Jeff and I are back for episode 3. I'm excited, Jeff. How you feeling today?
Not too bad, ready to get into the spring season here. We're slowly getting towards the official first day of spring, and it certainly feels like sports-wise we're hitting that stride too. March Madness, the Masters, it's going to be a great month.
Yeah, weather-wise, not so much. At least I don't know how it is, but even just getting back to Connecticut in the last couple of days after spring break, it's still kind of cold. Really not hitting that spring weather, and a lot of rain. A lot of rain. It's just not
Yeah,
fun.
better than
Definitely
snow
not.
though.
Before we get to the rundown and really start getting into any big topics, I want to ask you. March Madness is coming up later this week. How many brackets do you have so far, and how many do you plan on making?
I have 0 so far, and I plan to make one at probably 11:30 on Thursday. Boy, my college basketball watching used to be at a very, very high level, and now it's down to almost nothing. For a lot of different reasons, some of which we'll talk about later. But yeah, I'll do a bracket. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just gonna kind of fill it out at random, not just because of I don't watch as much, but just the way the college basketball is now, as we saw in the conference tournaments, absolutely insane. So I'll have one bracket. I'll put it in the CBS pool. I used to do like 5 or 6 different ones with friends brackets, but again, the fact that sports gambling is legal now in Maine, it definitely takes away from both fantasy sports and for certainly the brackets. So I'll fill one out though, just for the heck of it.
I already have 9, and I plan on getting very close to 25. I haven't even done the brackets yet
25?
for all the groups that I'm going to end up joining, and for
Wow.
some of my friends. But
Okay.
I'm telling you, I'm winning that money this year. I did my research. I've been watching more college basketball this year than in recent years. So
That might
I'm
be
ready.
the bad thing. To do research is bad because in March doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but my research was more like I listened to what some of the other people were saying, and I compared that to what I've seen, and I actually
Mm.
found a lot of times that my opinions were different. So I'm feeling it. This is the year where
All
even if I
right.
don't win the money, I'm confident about where my picks are. But we'll head right into the rundown segment with each of our 3 topics of the week. And Jeff, why don't you start us off with your first topic?
Yeah, just as we wrap up high school sports, they're finally over for the winter season. And just wanted to talk a little bit about the boys hockey Class A. Lewiston wins 5-0 over Bangor. Another state championship for the Blue Devils. Obviously, it's been a rough year for that community, so it's kind of nice. They did well in boys soccer as well. So they beat Bangor. Thornton Academy, our kind of home team. Lost to them in the semifinals. So had a great season for TA. Wasn't enough. Lewiston, though, boy, impressive performance all the way around. And so what I wanted to talk about is not just the game itself. Obviously, winning 5-0 wasn't much of a contest. And frankly, even the semifinals on both sides weren't a contest either. The dominance of the Blue Devils, and where does that rank over the other kind of Class A, Class AA teams' dominance in different sports over the years? So just some stats. So Lewiston, they've been to the state championship game 5 times since 2016. 12 times since 2002, 19 times since 1989. So, and they have 10 state championships since 1989. So for them, what's so impressive is now they're not winning it every single year, but every decade they're going to it 5, 6 times, going to the States and winning a couple. That longevity is incredible. Most programs kind of ebb and flow, even the really good ones. So I want to ask you, how does it stack up? I'll give you a couple of other kind of contenders in my mind for the other sports dynasties, I'll call them. TA football, of course, won 6 state championships since 2012. That was only 9 seasons as well, because obviously we had the COVID year that didn't really count. So, and their favorites are probably again for next year. But before 2012, decent team, but wasn't really much of a, wasn't a factor every single year until 2012. Bangor baseball, 7 appearances since 2014. They won 5 state championships. Now all those states were kind of in a row back in the late 2010s, but they're in it every year. Falmouth tennis, both boys and girls. They've won combined 11 state championships since 2014. They're always constantly in it. But for me, if you're talking about, one of the sports in high school and what school dominates, is Skowhegan. Skowhegan field hockey has been to every state championship game since 2001 and won 17 of those state championships, and they lost this year actually to Cheverus, who was just a dominant team. But yeah, to make it every state's from the former East, now the North, since 2001 is something it's unbelievable. And field hockey, as a sport, still pretty popular, and they've had some great teams up north. But just every year it's Skowhegan. I've never seen anything like it. So Lewiston, I will give the nod for longevity because, again, going back to the late 80s, they've been good pretty much. Every decade they've had a couple of runs at a state championship. So I'm definitely going to give them the nod on that one. But could be pretty much any. What is your opinion on which one maybe would be on the tops for yours?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, most of, if you asked anybody else, I'd say they're probably going to say TA football or Lewiston hockey, just because, you know, hockey and football are those major sports that people really pay attention to, and a lot of people probably don't know about Skowhegan's incredible run in the past couple of decades in field hockey. For me, it is Skowhegan, just because not only have they made it to the state championship every year since 2001, they've won 17 times. So it's not like they're just making it and
Mhm.
losing every year; they're
Right.
winning, and that's a winning program, and that's being able to cycle players in and out like that is pretty incredible. And so yeah, I mean, Skowhegan field hockey, excuse me, is definitely for mine. But it's interesting to see, and I like that you pointed out, Lewiston having such a tough year with what happened in October. But they're the soccer, a boys soccer team won. They had a great year for sports. Boys soccer team won state championship, and Lewiston pretty much dominated hockey this year. So. But it's pretty cool to see all these dynasties, in different sports for around the state of Maine, and hopefully some of these either continue or new ones can grow in the next couple of years for different sports and different schools.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'll head into my first topic. I'm going into some professional sports. Obviously, the NHL trade deadline just happened recently, a little bit, maybe a week and a half ago. So I just want to run through my grades, I guess you'd call it, for some of the top trades. I went through the top maybe 15. I'm just going to run through them quickly. If you have any thoughts, Jeff, jump in. I mean, I know I'm a big hockey guy, so a lot of these guys you may not know, but I'll just run
Most.
through it. But I'll
Yeah.
run through them starting from the earliest date on. So late February, the Dallas Stars acquired Chris Tanev and a goalie prospect for a second round pick and a conditional third. I gave this an A minus. I think the Dallas boost their defensive six without giving much of their pick or prospect pool. And one of the biggest trade names, Chris Tanev, went off the board early. I thought that was a pretty huge trade. They really they wanted him and they got him. They didn't wait until deadline day. Then March 5th, the only big one I had on that day was Vegas acquiring Anthony Mantha for a second round pick in the 2024 draft and a fourth round pick in the 2026 draft. I give this one a B. I think it's a solid pickup, but Mantha has been up and down and really plateaued on his ceiling of what he can do for Vegas. But I don't think they gave up a lot there, and you'll be hearing Vegas' name as I run through these real quick. The Panthers acquire Vladimir Tarasenko. Shout out my dad, who really thought Vladimir Tarasenko was going back to the Rangers, but that's not happening. They get him from Ottawa for a conditional fourth round pick and a third round pick in the 2025 draft. I give some a B plus. This is under the assumption that Tarasenko produces pretty well, but he's again one of those hot and cold players. And just to kind of skim through some of these other ones, guys like Adam Henrique. We see Joel Edmondson, Evgeny Kuznetsov, Kyle Okposo, a lot of guys that went through these trades. And a lot of these trades I gave them Bs because the teams that are picking up these guys, they're getting a good player who could be really hot, especially in the playoffs for them, but could be down, at a C or a D, with a grade if this guy just ends up being a 1-year player who doesn't do much for them and doesn't really help out in the long term. Some other big trades: the Carolina Hurricanes get Jake Gensel at 25% retained by Pittsburgh and defenseman Ty Smith. They give up Michael Bunting, a conditional first-round pick and a conditional fifth-round pick. I think this is one of the biggest deals of the draft. I think Michael Bunting was not working well in that Hurricane system, and they get Jake Gensel, who's going to be huge for them in the playoffs, and a guy that they hopefully can sign long-term. And I think that this could become an A-plus trade if they can get Gensel at a good long-term deal. Looking through some other ones, Vegas gets Noah Hannafin for a first-round pick, a defenseman, Dario Miromanov, and a conditional third-round pick. I think it's a solid pickup for Vegas. Hopefully, at least hopefully, in my opinion, Hannafin doesn't get extended because I don't like to see Vegas bulk up in any way, but it looks like that's what they're going to do. So I'm going to give him a B plus with that one. I think it's a solid pickup, but they're giving up a lot for the future. Vegas is definitely win now. They got a win now coach. They've got win now players. The question is how long can they be productive, and especially being a wild card team right now, I don't know if that's going to be if that's going to work out for them long term. But then another one that I really like, this is my favorite trade in the entire trade deadline, was a 1-for-1 trade. The Avalanche get Casey Middlestat, the Buffalo Sabres get defenseman Bone Byram. Those are two very, very young guys who just happen to be, not playing so well in the system that they were in with Buffalo and with Colorado, respectively. They get a swap 1-for-1, and I really think both teams benefit from this trade. And I like to see that when both teams get something out of it. So good for both of those guys to find new systems. And then other than that, the only real other one that I want to hit on is one that I think you might have some thoughts on. The Bruins acquire Pat Maroon from the Minnesota Wild for Luke Toporowski, an AHL guy, and a conditional 6th-round pick. In my opinion, this is an A trade for the Bruins. They get, a guy with fourth line physicality, and their fourth line's been all young guys who are missing that sort of experience, and that's something that they really needed. I think it's a big trade. I also think, Maroon really is only going to be a playoff guy. He's older. He's going to play 10 minutes a night. And honestly, I wouldn't want to see him play a lot of regular season games. And because of his injury he still has, he won't really play until middle April, play a couple games, and go right into the playoffs, which I think is the perfect timeline. But I want to get your thoughts. Obviously, we go back in time. Jack Edwards making some interesting comments about Pat Maroon. What do you think that locker room dynamic is? Not only with Pat Maroon coming into a situation where he had a pretty tough, still has a pretty tough relationship with Jack Edwards, but also, Pat Maroon enters a system of guys that he's fought with. He's fought with for years. He's gone against Brad Marchand, a lot of these guys, and he's joining them. Do you think that this is something that's going to be perfect, where he comes in and brings that veteran leadership, and he's won Stanley Cups before, and he can bring that? Or do you think this is going to be one of those situations where these guys just don't like each other and it doesn't work out?
Well, I think with Jack Edwards, it's kind of a non-story. I mean, obviously he called him fat in the past, but Jack Edwards, look, of all the local guys, I'm not a huge Jack Edwards fan for a lot of reasons. Obviously, he has a long tenured career. I don't think he is, I don't think he moves the needle a whole lot. Maybe within the Bruins, fandom a little bit. For those who still watch NESN, which I don't know how many people still watch NESN or pay for NESN, $30 a month for NESN Plus or whatever it's called. So I don't think that's as far as the locker room stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when a guy comes into a locker room, especially in a sport like hockey where they legit can fight. But I did see some of the comments he's made in the past about Brad Marchand, which again, a lot of them I wouldn't even argue with. But I think, look, these guys like Marchand and some of these other older guys, like they want to win a Stanley Cup. Like that's the goal. Like it's not about the ego, which I think in other sports it definitely would be more of a factor, basketball specifically. But here in hockey, I don't think it's going to be that much of a factor. I mean, if he can bring something to the team that can win them a Stanley Cup, then people are going to put their stuff aside. I mean, it's mid-March. We're talking 3 or 4 months. If they go to win a cup, they're going to have to only deal with this guy for 3 more months. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, at least for this year. On the trade front in general, I'm curious about your, for me, it's the moves they didn't make, keeping both goalies. What are your thoughts? Did you think that they just didn't find the right deal? Do you think I think we both agree that rotating goalies in the playoffs is a stupid idea. So what do you think their short and long-term thinking is in not trading one of their biggest assets that they had?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely that's your biggest point right there, and we talked about this before. I think in the first episode we talked about it, that the goalie tandem doesn't work for them. It's I don't know if you saw this, but they had a trade set up with the Kings. They were ready to let him go, but Linus Ullmark had a 16-team no-move clause, which is the largest no-move clause you can have unless you have every team. And so he gets the last say, which is yes or no, and he said no. I don't blame him for saying no. I know he likes this area. He's talked about it before and didn't want to leave, but I like the initiative from Don Sweeney to say, this is where his value is at, his high value, and they probably could have got a lot for him. I honestly would have expected the trade to have picks in it, because if you look at Boston's picks the next 3 years, they gave up a lot last year to bulk up, and we saw how that turned out. They didn't win a cup, so it really wasn't worth it, and now they're missing some picks. But I think his value is going to go down in the offseason. He'll still have 1 year at $5 million. That's still a solid contract, but there's a lot of teams that right now need a goaltender, and they could have gotten good value out of him. I think at the end of the day, you have to look to the future and say, Jeremy Swayman's your number one, and you have a younger guy as his backup, or you have a veteran as his backup. But I'm disappointed they didn't trade him. I would have been fine with them trading him. I will say this: the older I get, and the more I follow the trades and the value and the picks and the players and really getting involved, the less I really care about the whole like, oh, he's a great guy and he's good for the city and he loves the city. I understand every player's got feelings, but that's part of the business. And like I said, the older I get, the more I get to this point of like, it's great and all they're doing goalie hugs, but at some point you got to make decisions that are best for the team. And I think if they would have been able to offload him and get picks back or get a center, top two center, it would have really helped this playoff run. I don't think they're going to win a cup. I hate to say that as a Bruins fan, but I don't think they're going to win a cup. And I honestly don't even think they would have won a cup with Omar. No, with whatever they would have gotten back from Omar. But it's like without that trade, I feel like you're putting yourselves back another year. You could have gotten picks back. You could have gotten somebody you could sign long term. And it's just it was difficult for me. I definitely think you made that point. Is like the Bruins made a good trade with Pat Maroon and also defenseman Andrew Peeke, but it's what they didn't do that is the real question mark of is the same thing going to happen in the offseason? Are they going to make a lot of moves, or are they going to be quiet and wait a couple more years to really bulk up? So it's interesting, but I thought it was a solid trade deadline in total, but nothing crazy out of this world. The only other trade that I didn't mention was the Tomas Hertl trade from San Jose to Vegas. And San Jose retains a decent amount of the contract. And it just becomes this question of what can't Vegas do? Because Vegas is getting all these big players and getting rid of draft picks, but it still seems to be working. So I have to keep my eye on Vegas. We'll all have to keep our eye on Vegas here in the playoffs. They're still in the wild card position right now, so you have to wonder what that'll be for them. But an interesting trade deadline in total, and not much the Bruins did to make me think they're going to win a cup.
Yeah, at least something happened. You see some trade deadlines in other sports where nothing happens anymore. So it's nice to see the NHL being a little bit more aggressive. All right, my second story for this week is high school sports. Spring sports is already upon us. It usually seems like a big break, but because hockey ends so late now, pitchers and catchers report this week. And then next week, all the other spring sports in Maine are there. We'll definitely have some more like official previews of those coming up here in the next few weeks. But just in general, spring season's kind of interesting. So, football in the fall, and everyone's back to school, and it's always a great time. You have the winter season, which has basketball as kind of the tentpole. Spring, it's a tough sports season. I mean, first of all, you have the cold weather, and sometimes, literally between the span of your season, you could start in snow and end when it's like super hot. Now, this year, this doesn't look like we have any snow issues, at least down here in the southern part of the state. But some of those first games, I used to, cover baseball quite a bit, and get into those afternoons where it's 45 degrees, overcast, maybe a little damp outside, not very fun. So tough to start there, especially when you're just starting the practices. Also on the other end, state championships happen early June in most sports. Sometimes kids have already graduated, or certainly school's coming to an end. So there's a lot fewer fans in terms of student sections. I mean, I know at some of our lacrosse games here at Thornton, at least we have a couple games that have good student sections, but nothing like you see for, the big sports of football and basketball. Now, the spring season is kind of nice because it is laid back. Baseball, softball, you kind of just sitting out there in the sun. Those sports in general don't have always a lot of action as much as the other sports. You can kind of just sit out there and enjoy just being outside. So that's kind of a positive to it. I'm just talking from a covering point of view. It's great because you're back in the stadium, you're back outside. Just very little energy at some of those. And you look at the different types of sports too. Obviously you have a much more aggressive sport in boys lacrosse, baseball and softball, tennis, outdoor track and field, which outdoor track and field is great because you really get to see, it's the first time you get to see outside some of the field events as well, not just the running on the track. Girls lacrosse, I have a love-hate relationship with girls lacrosse, just because, the rules are very strict, and they're for player safety, but it's just more likely that you're going to have a blowout, one way or the other, because if you can have one or two players who can, dominate the sport, score a lot, free position attempts, all that. I don't know. I'd have to look in other states, see if they have the rules any differently. I just wish the rules were a little bit different to make it, I don't want to say a little more aggressive and physical, but there's like no touching basically at all allowed. And you have obstruction and all these other rules. So, I'm just thinking from perspective, we Zach and I, between the two of us, we've covered many games broadcasting. And sometimes, some of those lacrosse games, sometimes the boys ones too, where they're just kind of holding the ball and just waiting. I know that some states or some organizations have started a shot clock for lacrosse, and I know that might be coming in the next few years. We'll see about that. And of course, we'll preview what the, right now it definitely looks like there's a couple teams in Class A that are going to dominate in boys lacrosse at least. But yeah, so I just want to get your thoughts on the spring season. I know that you used to play soccer, which is obviously fall sport. You didn't really play much spring sports, but what is it like as a broadcaster, as a student, as you come into the spring season? What are your thoughts on just finishing off the year in sports?
I think you definitely covered it and really gave the best viewpoint on it. I think the winter sports season is so busy. I think, I even see it here, like with the coverage of men's ice hockey, women's ice hockey, the men's and women's basketball teams. The end of the beginning of the winter season is volleyball. It's very, very busy here at Quinnipiac. It was very, very busy at TA. It's especially with the teams being really good. And you kind of get into the spring, and you're right. You're back outside. The weather's nice. The sport's a little more slower, sports longer, and it's a little more of a relaxing, I would call it, type of situation. I think you're right. It can be hard at times to cover those sports. You've spent so long inside covering fast paced sports like basketball and hockey, and you have to turn around and you're calling a 3 hour baseball game, or you're covering 3 hours of baseball. But it's a good season for me. I always like it because the springtime is really an enjoyable time for me. So I like to be outside and cover those sports. But I definitely agree with everything that you mentioned of, the whole, situation of just being outside and those games being slower and the shot clock possibly coming to lacrosse. But I think it's always nice to see that at least TA wise has had a good boys lacrosse program, and I've got to call some great boys lacrosse games when I was in high school, and baseball won a state championship when I was in high school, and the softball and girls lacrosse teams were great. And it's the same thing here. There's some good teams here at Quinnipiac, so it's a good season. I really feel like it's the more just finishing out the year relaxing type of coverage. Not that that's not to say that covering these sports, you're not caring about them. Obviously, you care about them, and you want to produce the best quality content. But it's more just it's a nice way to end the year after such a busy winter sports season. And I've always felt like that's the highlight of the year, is the winter sports season, just because of where those programs were at in high school and where it was at in the state of Maine. I mean, you look at we've talked about the tournament for the last two episodes for so long about how huge that is to the state of Maine, and similar for hockey. So it's a little bit more relaxed, but always a great time for spring sports. All right, well, I head into my second topic, and this is one that you'll probably be hearing a lot about throughout this episode as we bring in our guest later on. But I want to talk about Maine Black Bears men's ice hockey. They just defeated UNH. They didn't really defeat them. They just kind of rolled over UNH 5-0 this past weekend. And they're heading to TD Garden for the first time since 2012. They're going to play BU. It's going to be an interesting game. It's a single elimination. They split the season series with BU, and the game that they won was really impressive the way that they came in. But I guess my question, what I want to talk about, I'll give some context and I'll ask you your thoughts. But this team currently only has one player that's been drafted. Bradley Neto, a first-round pick to Carolina, great player. His brother's also on that team as well. But, this is a team that has really settled in. They really have. It's been built up by the head coach. It's a program of guys who really, really have been here for a while and are working well. It's a system that works really well together. And I guess my thought is, how is this team very special in terms of where they've been in the past? Or is this more just like, they had a good regular season, but, this is their end here in the Hockey East tournament is BU, and they're probably not going to get very far in the NCAA tournament. I do really compare them to last year's Quinnipiac team. Did not have a lot of draft picks. Rand Pecknold had a really, really good roster, and he knew what he needed his guys to do, and they went out and they did it, and they won a lot of games. But do you think that Ben Barr, the head coach of the Black Bears, do you think that his team can settle down and beat BU next week? I mean, you're a BU guy, so I know you're probably rooting on those guys at the Garden. But do you think that this team are they rooted is the culture rooted enough for them to make a run, or is this more the beginning of what could be a dynasty back like the early 90s for the Black Bears?
Okay, so everyone can just take a deep breath. Yes, the Alphon was rocking this year. Yes, Maine has had its best season in a while, but let's all take a breath. They're playing with the big boys this weekend, against Boston University.
Yep.
They had, look, I think in the macro sense, Maine's on the up, which is great. It's good. It's good for college hockey for Maine to have a decent program. I mean, their teams back in the early 90s. I mean, they had that team that was 42-1-2 in the whole season. That one lost to Boston University, by the way. Well, regardless. So yeah, are they ready to make the big time? I'd be very shocked if they beat BU on Friday, and I'd be even more shocked if they won a tournament game or at least get into the Frozen Four. I think what's good for Maine, like you said, they don't have a ton of talent, like NHL ready talent when you carry like Boston College, Boston University. Where Maine I think is on the up, besides the coaching, obviously, is if you look at kind of the mess that the junior system is right now in the USHL. If you look at their roster, Maine's roster, lots of guys from Canada, a bunch of guys from Sweden. They're pulling in talent now that they weren't pulling in a few years ago for a lot of different reasons. And maybe it's NIL, maybe it's, probably not so much NIL, but a lot of the way that the junior system is working in hockey, a lot of these guys, you look at a guy at BU, the starting guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the 17-year-old going number one.
Macklin Celebrini.
A guy like that years ago.
And you call yourself a fan. You don't even know the best player's name.
I got a lot of names in my head. We got a lot of great players. But a guy like him a few years ago wasn't coming to college. They were going straight to, a junior program and then off to the NHL. So it's great for college hockey right now when you see, BU having 9 first-round picks on their team. Boston College has 7 or 8 first-round picks on there. So the state of college hockey is great, and I think it's going to help UMaine pull it up. Look, beating UNH, which, again, back in the day, we called them the University of No Hardware because they never win anything. Okay, I know it's great. It's their rival, but it's not, for me, that is not impressive. Yes, they beat BU during the year. I don't look at their schedule that they had this year and say they had a lot of signature wins. I think, and look, they're not playing at the Alphon anymore. I know that place is a madhouse in a good way. They're playing in the Garden, and they're gonna have to play, probably somewhere out west in the tournament. So I like that everyone's excited about it. It's good that they're good. I want them to be good. I'd rather have them good than Merrimack or UMass Lowell or some of those other teams that have been good for a little bit period over the year. Great season, but let's not get too carried away. I think BU, and it's going to be BU and BC in the Hockey East final. Whoever wins, we'll see that. I don't see Maine going far in the tournament. They're going to probably be one of the lowest seed, probably, or one of the lowest seeds at least. So good for Maine. The good and up and up. Not ready to get to say that they're going to be back to the early 90s because Paul Kariya is not walking through that door.
Of course, I think that's something that I definitely agree with. As my earlier point, obviously they're not the 1993 national championship winning team, and I don't think they're ever going to get back to that because that team is arguably
one. That was a freaky team.
That was one of the best teams in all hockey, NCAA hockey of all time. So I definitely think you're right. I don't think they're going to go very far, but they're on the up, and they have they're going to have some big games coming up. They are I think at this point, I don't want to say a guarantee, but I'm pretty sure all the teams that are ranked 8 and up nationally are guaranteed a spot. So I know, of course, BU is guaranteed. I think Quinnipiac is guaranteed at this point, no matter where they end up in the tournament. So you're right. Maine will probably have a low seed in the NCAA tournament, and they'll probably play somebody good like Denver, Michigan, BC, Quinnipiac, who knows, one of the top 5-6 teams. But it's good to see, and for years, that Maine, especially the last couple of years, Maine has been bottom of Hockey East, nothing going for them, and they had a really, really good year. And I also think it's important to say that Hockey East had a great year. Providence was good. UNH was surprisingly pretty solid this year. Obviously, BC's back to that number 1 spot. BU, another great year. So
Northeastern was ranked for a while. Yeah, they had a lot of ranked teams.
Hockey East was, in my opinion, the best conference this year. I think most years are the best conference, but it's just really, really, really good to see. But the BU Maine game, it's going to be an interesting one. My thing is that
6-2 BU.
My thing is that if Maine scores goals early, I'm worried about BU trying to work their way back because I don't think BU's done a very good job of doing that this year. I think that when they play their game well, they're scoring early and they're holding leads, and that's what you should be doing in hockey. But if the NATO brothers score a couple goals early, I don't know. BU might be a shock.
Yeah, I mean, for BU, looking at the tournament, goaltending is their biggest question mark. When they lose the Beanpot to Northeastern, and they got back-to-back losses to Boston College there in January. Was that one of those games? Goaltending is just suspect. So I think that's going to be, that's going to be the big question mark. But again, I agree with Hockey East in Maine. At least just making the TD Garden has been a rare occurrence in the last 10 years or so. So yeah, good for the Black Bears. It's funny because when I was at BU, we play Maine UNH, and we had bad chance for every team. And I'm not going to do the main one because it's a little inappropriate, but it was just one of those things that it's interesting because I was cheering against kind of my home state, even though there's almost nobody on the Black Bears from Maine, but still it's the home school. So all right, third and final one for me. I'll talk about March Madness, of course. The selection show's been done. The games start on Thursday. I'll give a quick take. I hate the first four. I think it's a joke. I think if you're going to do the first four, it should be the last 8 teams or the last 4 teams that get in. I think it's one of the worst travesties in all of sports that a team that wins their conference tournament doesn't get into the tournament proper. And I'm extra sensitive because, I went to a school, BU, that if they ever make the tournament, they're usually a 15 or 16 seed. It would be so stupid for them. And look, people say, well, they get their own primetime national game. It's not the tournament. I'm sorry. It was a way for them to make money. If you want to have a play-in for the last 4 to get in, then I'm a little bit more amiable to that. But yeah, that's my overall point, though. How relevant is the tournament still? Because we mentioned before about brackets. I think the state of college basketball, people love it because it's chaos, because, players make stupid decisions, because whatever, anything can happen, right? And I get the entertainment value, but as a fan, I'm a Duke fan, so go ahead and, everybody can shake their head. But I don't watch any games anymore because the guys are all one and dones, and you don't even get to really know the players until in the last 8 years. I probably only watched one season of a lot of Duke basketball. That was with Zion Williamson, because he was a once in a generation freak athlete at the college level, not so much the NBA level. But when I was a kid, when I was, your age, no, you're even younger than you, my early teen years, I would watch every single Duke game. I would watch UNC games, everything. I think, the fact that now they're all pretty much one and done, or some guys are even just skipping college, going to the G League or overseas. So for me, it used to be the biggest thing. I would take a day off of work for the first 2 days of the tournament, set up all the TVs I could possibly have in my house in one room. My friends would come over. Now it's just yeah, I'm going to throw the games on, but we don't really know the teams or players. It's just we're hoping for a crazy buzzer beater or a big upset at the end. So for me, it's not a big deal. For me, what I'm looking for in the tournament, both the men's and women's, are the Mainers in the tournament. And we actually have 4, probably more actually, but these are the 4 that kind of came to my mind. They're going to be in the tournament. On the men's side, you have Nick Fiorello, who's playing for Vermont. They're playing against the Blue Devils, so that'll be a fun first one for them. JP Estrella, of course, on Tennessee. They're a very high seed. I think they're a 2 seed this year. So they'll be right near the top, not playing a whole lot, but getting some minutes there. And then on the women's side, you have Anna DeWolf, who plays for Notre Dame. And, of course, Mackenzie Holmes, of all the players we talked about, one of the best players in the country. We've talked a little bit about her in the past. Just incredible career at Indiana in her 5th year now as a Hoosier. They have a great chance to go deep. Obviously, Caitlin Clark's getting a lot of publicity. South Carolina, LSU, teams like that get a lot of publicity. But Mackenzie Holmes and their Indiana Hoosiers, I'll be looking on for them. So, and obviously next year you'll have Cooper Flagg adding to that list, and you will lose a couple of these players who were in it this year. But pretty awesome that we're going to see some actual, Mainers who played Maine high school basketball playing in the NCAA tournament this week in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll name some of the ones that you missed, which you may not have known. It's guys, but it looks like Brady Cummins with Colgate. They're going to play Baylor in the first round. They're a 14 seed, and then Don Campbell, who was at Notre Dame, then transferred to Howard. Howard is one of they have to play the first four.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if they do win, I believe Howard would play UNC. So that's pretty cool for them.
Yeah,
it's definitely really cool to see all these Mainers in there. And I also saw that it could work out that Kenzie Holmes and Anna DeWolf, Notre Dame and Indiana could play each other in their region, which would be really, really cool to see. But to go back to your point about the tournament, I definitely do understand, your I don't even know what I'll call it, your frustrations, I guess, with. It's an entertainment thing. I think as I get it as a fan, sometimes it's hard to watch a league where it's there's no like 4 or 5 teams that lose maybe 1 or 2 games a season and they barely ever get upset. Nowadays, it's like, and even the regular season, anybody can lose at any point. And then the tournament, even especially in recent years, 15, 16 seeds have been it's a lot more common to see them upset. But I really like the tournament just because it's just the time of the year when it happens. I like that you have all the conference tournaments, and that this year for me, I've watched a lot more. As I mentioned in the beginning, I did a lot more research this year. But I'm interested to see what really happens this year. I think this year is going to be a lot more. The game's gonna be a lot more interesting. I mean, I think you're gonna see a lot of buzzer beaters. I think you're gonna see a lot of, like you said, mistakes. I don't know if I think it was a game last week where I think it was Kent State in the championship. They scored.
He fouled. Yeah,
He fouled.
one.
Just that probably the dumbest thing you can do, and lost his team the game.
Yep.
So you're gonna see a lot of that this year. But yeah, I agree.
I don't bet on it. That's why I don't gamble, because it's ridiculous. You're betting on like college kids who are gonna make bad decisions. It's like, so I can't bet on it. Now a bracket's one thing, but betting on individual games, I just won't do it, because I would get so frustrated when they made a stupid mistake. I mean, here's some crazy things too. I mean, you look at, so you have the Long Beach State coach who got fired basically before the conference tournament. They win the conference tournament. The NC State coach, who basically was on the hot seat, now is basically, because they made the tournament, it's got another extension for 2 years. You have all these situations where it's just these odd situations that teams have made these miracle runs into the tournament. So it's that, for that part, I agree. It is a little bit madness. But this year specifically, there've been a lot of those weird. A Temple at that point, they had like a point shaving allegation, and then they're going to the conference championship. So it's nuts.
I agree, and I think the one other thing about the tournament that's been interesting, and I think I see it a lot more than some people have, but the Big East with Seton Hall. I had it right in my head and I lost it. St. John's, and one other, didn't get in, and a lot of people frustrated with that. And I also saw that basically the tournament below March Madness is called the NIT. Some people know about it, some people don't. It's basically like all the teams that barely made it but didn't. So it's just like the next worst down. And I saw that St. John's and Seton Hall declined offers to go play in that tournament. I don't blame them. You're so frustrated. You're like, I'm not going to play in the basically the losers bracket.
Plus the transfer portal opened like today. So those coaches already have to start planning for next year, which is a stupid thing that they have to, that the transfer portal doesn't start at the beginning of, at the end of the year. But yeah. So yeah, March Madness is always going to be a thing, because there's nothing else going on. People keep saying there's nothing like March Madness, but it's just because it's chaos and people like chaos, and there's nothing else going on in sports right now. So it's fine. I'm going to watch, but it used to be, I'm going to watch all day, every day for at least the first 4 days. And now I have it on the background. That's the difference.
Of course. Well, my last topic, we're basically staying with this. I'm talking about March Madness, obviously, and we did mention it a couple of times in the last few minutes, but I guess I want to kind of go in. I have a real big question for you. So at Quinnipiac was number 1 in the MAC tournament. They got upset. Thanks. I appreciate that. Actually, I don't know if you saw the game, but Matt Blanc hit a turnaround fadeaway 3, tied the game. They call a timeout, and they get just really nice. St. Peter's gets a nice bucket. They win the game. But so many upsets, and I'm going to read off all the ones just in the conference tournaments. So you've got obviously Quinnipiac losing to St. Peter's. Duke and UNC lose to NC State in the ACC. Purdue overtime loss in their final to Wisconsin. Houston only scored 41 points in a final loss to Iowa State. Oregon upsets Arizona. Texas A&M upset Kentucky. My question to you is, and I think I already know your answer to this question, but let's just say in a different world, hypothetical world, upsets were very uncommon. The number 1 seeds, the number 2 seeds are winning their conference tournaments. You go to the March Madness, and we're seeing maybe 1 or 2 upsets. And if it's a 14 or 15 seed, they lose the second round. No Cinderella runs. Do you think that college basketball loses? Do you think there's any value in college basketball? Do you think anybody would even care about it if there wasn't all these upsets? Because in my opinion, that's what makes it so interesting to me and so interesting to so many people is you watch the tournament the first 2 days to see the 15, 16 seeds win. And then afterwards, when your bracket you got 14 games wrong in the bracket, nobody cares anymore. You stop watching. You only watch like the final or maybe the semifinals if you got an interesting game or matchup in there. But my question to you is do you think that the entertainment value of college college basketball would drop significantly if in this hypothetical world upsets just don't happen.
Yeah, I think so. In the early rounds, for sure, it's about the upsets. It's about those 15, 16, 14 seeds or whatever that make a run. Not just a first upset, but now you're seeing teams like St. Peter's a few years ago making like a Final Four run, which is insane, which didn't used to happen. I think the problem is, and the reason why I liked college basketball in the past was I want to see, high quality play. And yes, some of these upsets are crazy. The buzzer beaters are crazy. The stories between the games, like, okay, let's say, a team, makes a Sweet 16. That's a 14 or 15 seed that next week before they play. A lot of great human interest stories. I get that. I'm always protecting against blowouts at the end of the tournament because I don't really care what happens on day 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I'm a college basketball fan, I want to see what happens at the end. And my problem is when some of these teams are getting to the Elite Eight or the Final Four, eventually they run into a team who knows what they're doing and they get smoked by 40. And it was like, oh, well, they weren't supposed to be there anyway. And it's like, well, great. But like, I just had to sit through and watch that. And like, I don't want to watch a national championship or a Final Four game where it's, 73-48. Like, that's not very fun either. So I think college basketball, people would say, the TV people would say, yeah, we love upsets because it gets eyeballs on it. But you have to have the right kind of upset. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a number 8 Texas A&M seed. I'm just making that up. Make a deep run. Nobody cares about Texas A&M. Like, you can't be a major conference team and make a Cinderella run. Like, NC State, cool story in the ACC tournament. Nobody wants to see them make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. No one in power. Now, someone like Loyola Chicago, when you had the whole, the old nun, you have St. Peter's, you have, Florida Gulf Coast a few years ago, the alley-oop guys. That's interesting to a point, but eventually when it gets to the Final Four, unless that team's going to win it all, there's got to be a reason why they were a 15 seed to begin with, So for me, I enjoy the upsets to a point. I do think, though, at the end, I want the best products in the Final Four, and I want a legit champion. But again, in college basketball, you just never know. Because again, you have so many of these teams, these big time teams with these one and done players who don't know how to play under pressure that routinely lose to a mid major who maybe have 4 starters who are juniors or seniors, and in a one off game that can happen. So for that matter, what I hate the most about college basketball now is I hate when they have the Final Four at like this big football arenas now, and it's all about the money. These big cavernous places with no atmosphere at all. It's cool video to show like Texas Stadium and everybody, but with the fact that all the coaches like below the court and you have to like go up to get on the court, like that's nowhere else in the whole season do you do that. So again, I'm just probably an old guy tilting at windmills, but there's just so many things about the game now. There's just so much about money. It just frustrates me.
Before we move on, just got to get, who do you think is going to win? And give me a team that maybe you think is going to disappoint, like a team that, drops out in the first 2 rounds.
I'll stick right in the ACC. I think my team Duke, I think they're primed for an early round exit. I mean, maybe not in the first round. They're playing Vermont. I think maybe a second round exit. I think Duke's like a 4 seed. I don't see them. I don't see them going that far. And on the other side, I think UNC wins it all. And I say that probably a little bit because I really don't like UNC, and sometimes so it's a win-win. If I predict that they win and they lose, and they don't. But I don't know. I think I don't see Purdue winning it. Just looking. Houston. I see UNC. I think Kentucky probably bows out a little bit early. But yeah, I think North Carolina rises to the top. I think they've been pretty battle tested and they get some great players. So, and they've been there before. So UNC for the championship and Duke to go out early, unfortunately. And I will say again, I don't want to call it a big upset, but you mentioned Quinnipiac, your alma mater, my alma mater, BU, conference semifinals against Lehigh, low-ranked opponent, and we had an 18-point lead at halftime and blew it and lost in overtime. Just pathetic effort. So both of us are pretty disappointed because the last time the BU won the conference tournament was the COVID year, and they didn't get to play. So,
yep. You stole my thunder with that UNC pick. I think UNC, the NC State loss is a tough loss, but I think overall, I think they're strong. I think UConn's another one that's going to end up in the Final Four. The versatility they have throughout their starting 5 is insane. The one thing I think people are writing off Houston really early, especially after that 41-point pathetic is a great word for it. Pathetic performance in their conference final. I think that they have a really strong team. Their interior defense is insane this year. But my disappointment, or the team I think is going to get upset really early, is Marquette. And the only reason I say that is because if the research I've been reading is correct, one of their best shooters is out, And other than that, that's pretty much their whole team. So if you still haven't made your brackets and you're looking for an upset, Marquette is a 2 seed. Watch out. I think they play Western Kentucky first round. Who's I don't even know. I think I pick Western Kentucky in almost every bracket because I'm just trying to be different for that.
But you have to be. You have to take a flyer on these random teams.
Yeah.
And it's so stupid now because there's always a 15 seed seems that win to win.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pick that team and they lose by 40, because you're like, well, yeah, of course they lost by 40. They're playing Kentucky or they're playing Tennessee. But you just have to get lucky. It's just it's nuts.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll finish. Before we go to the take that has nothing to do with sports, I'm just going to run right into that. We have our guest first, and it is a big one. We've been excited to have this one all week. We want to welcome in Jack Webb from UMaine. I'm really excited. So let's get into that one.
All right, now we're going to start our interview segment. We have a very special guest, the up-and-coming Maine media legend, class of 2018 from Thorne Academy, played football at Sacred Heart in UMaine, offensive lineman and now co-host of 92.9 The Ticket and ESPN Plus sideline reporter for UMaine men's, women's basketball, and ice hockey. We have Jack Webb. Jack, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to be on here. You guys have been doing some great stuff, and it's just so good to see, Jeff, you're really the one who, I know at least for myself, got me into this. You know what I mean? Before you and your idea of Trojan Talk, that there was no sports media thing. It's just something I consume, not necessarily thought of like, generating and doing for myself. And I think that's opened the door for people like Zach and Cole and all these other guys, Cal. And it's just so much fun. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too. I think I mentioned this before, maybe is how lucky I've been because from going back to Tyler Cataract and, obviously through Cal and all you guys, we've been so lucky that you guys have all been great. Like never have I been, maybe in the first few times that you're on the air, but otherwise it's not like, oh boy, I got to have a dump button ready to go, or I have to make sure they don't say anything inappropriate. I mean, it's just been super lucky, which is why we should just like cut and run because sooner or later our luck's going to run out. But yeah, doing the Trojan Talk stuff and obviously having you as more of an interview guy, we'll kind of get into that too. But it's been really cool. Like different types of kids have come through, a lot of play-by-play people as well. But as we'll talk about, those jobs are few and far between, so you kind of have to branch out. I want to start off first talking a little bit about your playing career. Obviously, you played for Thorne Academy here, very decorated player here. You went to Sacred Heart, played football, and then eventually transferred to UMaine. Had a lot of injuries, and really, your career ended due to injuries. And kind of just starting straight off, as a guy who played football for his whole life, you get that college scholarship, you go to a couple schools, you're finally getting to the point where you get that last injury, and what is that thought process and being like, this is it. Like, I'm done. I just can't do it anymore. And what is that mindset? I mean, you're a positive guy, everyone that knows you, but that still has to take you to kind of a dark place that this is it. And there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, 100%. It's a really harsh reality. You know what I mean? The majority of people who play sports at the next level outside of just high school, and it happens to people in high school as well, is that, your health a lot of the times is your downfall and can end your career. You know what I mean? I was never a guy who was going to go play in the NFL. I was really lucky to be at the FCS level like I was, and I kind of almost had like a reverse career for the first 4 years. You know what I mean? I did really well my freshman year. Sophomore year, I definitely had a little sophomore slump, but I still played in some games and saw a little bit of time. I think I played in 2 games, freshman and sophomore year. Then junior year, transferred to the University of Maine. And then in that spring, I had a compound. I was riding a bicycle. It's super. I wish I had a cooler story. I'm riding a bicycle. We're on the way to the beach, coming down this little hill. Another family coming. I swerve off the path, compound fracture of my tib, and dislocated my ankle. So it was like, we're talking just gruesome injury. And I really thought, for a while there, that was going to be it. It took me like 18 months to recover. So I used the old red shirt. I had it in the back pocket and came back for my 6th year. And was actually able to play in 5 games for the University of Maine. Got my first career start. And it's just like, it was so weird because it went so high and then so low. And it really came back. And as much as it sucked to have it end in injury, I guess I didn't finish the story. So it's Wednesday of homecoming week. Our starting guard is hurt. And so I get called into coach's office on Wednesday before practice. He's like, you're going to start this week. Homecoming, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. I was super excited. And then that practice, I ended up blowing my knee out in a scout team period. And that was the end of it for me. And I got really lucky because playing there at the end helped me feel like it was fulfilled and it was all worth it. If I didn't play, I'm really not sure how I would feel about it right now. But it was awesome. It's a really cool experience, but it's also a very difficult one mentally. You know what I mean? When you get hurt, something like that. I have a very unique situation. For a lot of people that know my dad, he's got 2 prosthetic legs, and he is just, you would have no idea. If he wore pants, you'd say that guy walks funny, and you'd have no idea just because of his mindset. And even through all the surgeries and everything, that guy walks downstairs and literally puts his legs on to go to work every day. And it's like I'm sitting there feeling sorry about, a broken leg or a busted up knee, and that really helped put it in perspective for me. And I think that's why I benefit from something like that, or recover from an experience like that better, and I'm able to stay positive through it all. So I really got to give all credit to my dad there.
Yeah, I want to go back to, and your dad's a legend. We all know he's been a great supporter of Thornton Academy and our program as well. But I want to go back to something you said about a sophomore slump. At Thornton Academy, we've had several athletes go to the D1 level, especially for football. And it is kind of a common theme. You go in your freshman year, you make an impression, but in talking to some of those guys, that second year is so difficult because unless you are so far and away better than everyone else, there's a young pup coming in right behind you. He's got fresh legs. He's coming just something to prove. And the coaches kind of tell you it's not your job to win or lose just because you're a sophomore. We're playing the best guy. So talk about that. It's not just about maybe you how you played that year, but having all this new crop of guys that are just as big as you and fast and strong, but they're the young ones that maybe have the future. What is that like in the locker room and that time you realize like, wow, I'm not taking that progression in the second step.
Yeah, so it's so interesting now because I recently, this past fall, I was still a part of the UMaine football program, but medically retired. So I was kind of on the coaching side of things. I was almost like we call it a player coach. You know what I mean? And and I just got to see how they think, and what the business side of it really is, because for them it's their full-time job. You know what I mean? Division I coaches and even D3 coaches. Sometimes they're assistants, but especially the Division I level, it's everything they got. They're fully bought in. They're trying to advance their career as well, and their whole goal, when they bring a new recruiting class in, they're trying to recruit you in the building. They're trying to bring someone in who's going to take your spot and be better than you are. And it's up to you to keep pace with that. And that's something I definitely had to learn the hard way in all facets, in terms of not just on the field, but strength and conditioning, nutrition, in the classroom. It all adds up, and it's all so critical to success in collegiate athletics. And it's something I definitely did not understand at the time and did not take serious enough at the time, and it hurt me for sure. And I think that's something everyone can learn from a story like mine, is you can't let your foot off the gas pedal or you will pay the price.
Last question for me before I let Zach chime in. You mentioned, starting at Sacred Heart and coming to UMaine. You want to talk about that a little bit? Like first of all, what the process was like. It was before the NIL/transfer portal craziness that we have now, where basically everyone jumps ship every year. Was it something about UMaine coming? Was it, what was the thought process about coming up to your home state to play football for your last couple of years?
So we had played a home game my sophomore year at Sacred Heart. Second year at Sacred Heart, came up to Maine right after Maine made the Final Four FCS playoff run, and it was a sold out crowd. I think students had just moved in like the day before. It was just an unbelievable experience, and it's something I hadn't really considered in the recruiting process. And then I got up there, and I was like, man, like this is it almost hurt me a little bit that I wasn't over there on that sideline experiencing that, because as you guys know, I have a lot of pride in the things I represent. You know what I mean? In terms of family, I wear Thornton Academy on my sleeve. I now wear UMaine I still wear a shoe on my sleeve for a lot of times, and I really care about the state of Maine, and it's something I hold dearly. And I was like, man, like that would be really cool to experience that. And when COVID hit, I had always loved to death the people at Sacred Heart. You know what I mean? Those are still my people, best friends today. But I never necessarily, I guess, fell in love with the place. Going from southern Maine to Bridgeport, Connecticut is for sure a little different. You know what I mean? So I guess I never truly felt, in my heart of hearts that was fully home. You know what I mean? In terms of location, there are a lot of other factors that go into it. So I got to go back up to Orono during COVID. It was a very unique transfer situation in terms of everything that was going on. Obviously, the world was so crazy at the time. But I'm just extremely fortunate that I've been able to settle in up here, and it's been great.
Now, you're talking to a guy who had the same experience, not in college, but obviously going to another state, thinking, it's a great experience. Like, again, for my 8 months in Florida, I don't regret anything. It was great. Because it made me know where I wanted to live for the next phase of my life. So, it's interesting now. But I think what's interesting is I mentioned what's happening now, because I think the way you went about it makes a lot of sense. I'm not necessarily happy as a fan of college sports, football and basketball, the way that kids are just basically not really thinking about the play. So like, how much am I going to make and how much playing time am I going to get? Oh, I'm not going to get playing time. Well, then I'm out of here. Or those small programs like UMaine, Sacred Heart, who are putting in the work to develop these guys, and as soon as they get a whiff of a bigger place, they're off on it. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but let Zach kind of jump in here with the next question.
Yeah, so we talked about it right briefly when we introduced you, but recently you've been on this like insane grind of ESPN Plus reporting for the basketball teams and the Maine ice hockey team, and I feel like I see your stuff on Twitter all the time, and I feel like every night I was seeing like, oh, I'm you say, oh, I'm back on tonight, watch the game, and I'm like, oh my god, he's been going so hard. Talk a little about that opportunity. Tell me about like, what it was like starting that, and what is it like now, just kind of going every night and just doing your thing.
Yeah, it's been probably some of the most fun I've ever had. I honestly, if I'm being fully honest, I've been having more fun with it than I had fun playing football. It's so cool. It's so unique. And I'm really lucky where I got to start this out at a place that I care so much about. You know what I mean? I'm really invested in. It's not just a job. Like every single person, whether it be the people behind the camera, the people on the court, the coaches, everyone, I have personal relationships with that I'm invested in. And I had prior relationships. And I think that just makes it so much easier and so much fun for me to experience. And it's been easier to ride the ups and downs. You know what I mean? Whether I mess up a little bit or I'm just, make a mistake. Like I remember I wanted to interview a coach right before a game. You know what I mean? And it maybe wasn't the best time, but because of that prior relationship, they were willing to work with me. It wasn't just like a, screw off, you know what I mean, type of thing. It's like, okay, next time let's do this, instead of just shutting the door on my face. You know what I mean? I think that's benefited me a lot. In terms of just getting involved, Maine, they didn't necessarily have the same type of media program. You know what I mean? Like Zach, like you're doing right now at Quinnipiac. Awesome program. You're going to get so many reps and learn so many things throughout your college career that I'm just learning right now, recently graduated. You know what I mean? And what I've benefited from about that is that there's not a ton of people trying to do it up here. So for someone like myself to just take initiative and do it where there's a need, they've kind of just let me run with it and do my own thing. And I just kept taking some rope by rope, you know what I mean? Started doing women's basketball. They let me do men's basketball. And then before the new year, I was like, hey, what do we think about hockey? And they were into it, and I just kind of took it and ran with it. And it's seriously been some of the most fun I've had.
It's interesting, too, talking about ESPN Plus. It gets a lot of flack from a lot of people in general, and I totally get it. I have a lot of qualms with ESPN and how they've changed over the years. But as a fan of a college team at Boston University, I mean, I was able to watch like every single one of their games this year. I don't have NESN or any of that NESN Plus stuff anymore. I don't have cable. But like being able to watch that and watch almost any college game that you want, and there'd be sometimes I like the other night I threw on the Maine UNH game, just obviously I was interested. So I think that's, and I hope that they don't change that, where they're basically taking these local broadcasts and they're throwing it on. I watched a lot of BU basketball, which again could never have watched before unless it's on CBS Sports, the college network. So I think that's been a really cool opportunity. You get to get some reps with the ESPN logo on your mic flag. I'm sure that felt pretty good. But these teams are already doing these broadcasts, whether it's for video or radio, and now they're able to kind of put it on ESPN Plus. So I hope as ESPN Plus, there's talks about a merger between ESPN Plus and Fox Sports and I think maybe Paramount Plus. I hope that doesn't take away from the college sports, because I think for those kids, it's a great way to get some experience. But is this something that you could see yourself doing in the future? Like when you were at TA, you weren't really much of a play-by-play. You did a little bit, but where you excelled was the interviews with people. And there was a famous one, and maybe we'll put a clip in here if we can, of you getting mic'd up at a lacrosse practice. And the funniest stuff, and I can only put it into like a 3-minute segment. There was an hour's worth of just hilarious stuff. And again, the best part was we kind of forgot the mic was on after a while. And it would just be like, oh, I'm just sweating so much today. Like it's just gold stuff like this, because that's just natural you. So how do you feel like, in this world, this media right now, where everyone's got a podcast, which is great, and people have a blog, how do you stand out if you can't go the traditional route of being a play-by-play guy, or certainly the news stations are not doing sports as much anymore? So not to put you on the spot, but like, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah, no, that is something
I'm sure your dad asked too, right? Your dad's probably asking the same thing.
Yeah, my dad, my mom, all of them, and that's something I think about every day, especially in a world where there's a lot of people out there right now post college where you kind of pick a field and different jobs might come, but maybe you have like a career path that you want to go down and achieve. For media, there's nothing. You know what I mean? There's no set. Okay, you're going to go from step A to step B to step C, and there's not really any of that right now. And I've really been trying to balance it by trying to do a little bit of everything. I've just been talking to people I've met along the way, and they always say that you don't have to be great at everything, but you got to be pretty good at everything. You know what I mean? So I've just been trying. I recently started a blog, and that's not even really to put a bunch of stuff out there. That's just for me practice. You know what I mean? And just trying to fine tune skills in every aspect of it. And in terms of how I came up with the TATV stuff and in my journey through that, and by came up I mean journey. You came up with it,
right?
But I think that's the type of side I have to tap into. I think I'm more of a conversational, almost journalist, reporter, more like these guys like Cole, Cal, Zach. I mean, you guys are just have some serious talent in terms of the play-by-play stuff. And I sit there and listen to you guys, and I don't think there's a world where I'm, a play-by-play guy or, a numbers guy, anything by that means. So I think my route is for sure going to be the journalism, casual type of conversation, you know what I mean, like we're having now. That's why I enjoy the radio so much. I understand it's almost a dying breed, but up on 92.9 The Ticket in Bangor, we have a great time. You know what I mean? It's just like us right now. We're sitting around. I like to say we're just snapping it around in the power play. You know what I mean? It's like we just have a great time. We get to interview people, have casual conversations. And that's something I've really enjoyed about the reporting. I almost enjoy the interviews, between periods, post-game with coach, more than I do the reports. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I have a great time with those, and it's so fun to put a piece together, have all these different things and see it come together as one. So I think that's the route I would like to pursue. But what's so difficult now is with social media, there's so many different avenues to go down. But even with those different avenues, I'm not one of those guys who wants to sell out for clicks. You know what I mean? I want to just post some things that you can just see scrolling on TikTok that might make you blow up on TikTok. But you're almost like, I want to stay true to myself and be who I am. You know what I mean? And in that, I trust it'll work out, and maybe it won't. You know what I mean? But I think I can live with myself knowing that I stayed true to who I am.
Yeah, what's interesting too, as you mentioned that is it's a really tough time because there's so much content. But on the flip side, it has never been easier to get noticed. I mean, if you go back 20 years, there was no option for you to start a blog. You could, unless you want to start your own newspaper and distribute it like Dave Portnoy did. I mean, that was a grind for years. So it's kind of funny where it's like anybody can buy a microphone for $100 and do a podcast. And if it's interesting, you're going to catch on, right? But at the same time, everybody has a podcast, and it's really tough to do that. So no, I think it's the grind it's going to be difficult for your generation. Even I'm not that much older than you guys, but still figuring out what's the next step. It's so difficult to kind of set yourself apart. And thankfully, Zach is still kind of the beginning of that journey in college. And I told him, I told all these other guys that have come through our program, like, yeah, you want to do play-by-play, but make sure you know how to set up the camera. Make sure you know how to do a microphone, because that first job, my first job was not in television. It was at a TV station, but it was not being on TV. It was doing the bare bones, promotions, contests, things like that. So that's an interesting point to grind it out and just keep making your content, because if you can have that conversation, interviewing is my favorite skill as well too, because once you get really good at asking people questions, that goes way beyond sports. For a job that you want in the future, it's not just on interviewing, like actual interviewing for a job, but when you can engage with people, that's going to open so many doors for you where you can go up to anybody. I told Zach, I can go up to any person that I have never seen, never heard of, and I can ask them 5 questions and know how to get a decent answer out of them for that. So I think that's definitely it's definitely good quality to have.
Yeah, I got a couple things. So it's funny you mentioned that. So one thing I like, getting back to this is kind of, I'm going to crisscross here. Getting back to the ESPN plus stuff, something I really like about it is it allows the people who've been around the team all year to do those games. You know what I mean? The people you see on these ESPN plus broadcasts through the school are the people who are with them every game. They watch with their full focus. You know what I mean? And what happened with the America East Championship on the women's side when it was hosted at Maine, ESPNU came in and took over. So we weren't allowed to do any of it. And obviously those are professionals. It's on national TV, ESPNU. They're going to know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? But I think that's what's so nice about it is instead of, your team has a game, they bring in a crew that hasn't really been around them all year. You get a crew that's around them year round, has relationships with everyone, and it kind of just makes it almost a more suited home style broadcast to your favorite team when they have a home game. But because it was on ESPNU, I wasn't doing any reporting, so I was actually able to help with the broadcast. I was a timeout coordinator, and it was a really cool experience to see behind the scenes. So obviously, it's on national television, so everything runs off the game. The players are on the court. I mean, there's a minute left until we come back from break. I'm standing up like this, holding everyone up. But it was so cool to see, that side of things and just being able to gain another experience. That wasn't necessarily on camera, but something, I'll never forget. Paul Paps was one of my professors, the Dan Patrick Show at Sacred Heart. And he was like, you just try everything. Never say no. And Zach, I think when you talked about the grind I've kind of been on these past few months, and just game after game after game, it's just because I don't want to say no to anything. You know what I mean? And I guess my mindset is you never know who's watching. You know what I mean? And you never want to skip an opportunity, for sure. So I think that's kind of what it's been all about for me.
One of the things I got most mad about the Patriots season last year, there's a lot of things to be mad about, was the broadcasters, because game after game after game, these guys would come in, obviously having not watched the Patriots for the last 2.5, 3 years, because they'd say, well, this is a Bill Belichick defense, and he's going to be like, no, that's not. This is not the same. This is not this has been 4 years now of them being mediocre. I don't want to go down that path, but I got really upset at the announcers, as somebody who does announcing, being like, these guys are resting on the last 20 years, not the last 3.5 years. And it makes you look stupid, because the people who are watching, which are, people like me, you can't say like, oh, special teams has always been a Bill Belichick specialty. Well, they've sucked for 3 years. I'm sorry, but that's not but you're just being lazy. You're not doing your research. And so that's why when you mentioned the ESPNU people came in, I hope that they gave them, the same kind of, benefit, especially for something like women's college basketball, which there's so many different teams and conferences. Who knows how much they really knew. So I think it's important to get these local guys and girls some more opportunities. It's definitely great, because you see it at the upper levels. Some of these guys, they may be professionals, but they're not very good at their jobs, to be honest. Speaking of UMaine, Zach has a question about some of your Black Bears and their playoff aspirations.
Yeah, on this podcast, no matter what we talk about, it always ends up with how much we hate the Patriots. That's just how it's always.
We don't hate the Patriots, but if we don't draft Marvin Harrison, we hate the Patriots. Yes, okay. It's Marvin Harrison or bust.
I'm
100%.
Before we get into some of the actual teams, I want to ask you just really quick. Obviously we said a lot of reporting this year. Can you give me your favorite moment, favorite interview that you've been able to do? Favorite. Maybe it was something that you said that you were like, wow, that sounded really nice. I liked how I said that. Like, just give me your favorite moment from this year so far.
Yeah, I'll give you two. The first one was on senior day for the women. I had I'm talking about, it was one of the last games of the season. I knew it was one of my last opportunities. I'm like, I'm gonna have to start putting together a reel soon. Like, I really gotta, take this stuff to the next level, lock in even more. Mm-hmm. I probably practiced my intro for an hour and a half in front of the mirror. Like, I had that thing down where I didn't even need to look. I was acting like I was looking right at the camera, holding a water bottle. I had it down. I really locked in. I was like, I'm going to nail this one. We get there. Started to do it. The gym goes silent. They start warming up for senior day in the middle of the hit. They all start walking towards me. And I'm like, and this is part of the growing experience. I really, to be a professional, I got to push through that. You know what I mean? But it's probably, this is my first season doing it. I'm sitting there. You know what I mean? I was shook. I was rattled. I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, guys, I got to move. Because it was a pre-tape. It wasn't live. It was a pre-tape for the intro. So I move. We do it again. I nail it. Exactly how I practiced in the mirror. Couldn't use it. Mix up in the audio. Wasn't able to use it.
Oh, no.
And then we go to do it again, and I have more rookie mistakes where it gets loud. I'm doing it. I'm kind of on a roll. I'm halfway through it. Gym goes silent. Everyone's watching a video on the video board, and for a split second, I heard myself talking loud, and I was the only voice in the gym while everyone is staring. So I'm probably right under the video board. Everyone's staring at the video board. And I'm talking like this, and it just didn't go. That one didn't go the way I wanted it to, but that's the one we ended up using because we were on a crunch. That's one of my favorite ones to just kind of show that, definitely a learning lesson for me. You know what I mean? That no matter what, push through. No matter what's going on up here, you got to finish the job. You know what I mean? And then The second one actually just happened on Saturday from the clip we all laughed at in the group chat where my earpiece dies. I don't know when I'm on camera. It's a Hockey East playoff game. It's probably the most eyes I've had on me all year. I really wanted to nail this one because it was my first time on camera in the broadcast. I'm like, I got to leave everyone with a good impression. I start for 5 seconds like this. And it doesn't help that our great hockey analyst Mike's going, Jack, we're live, and you can hear it on the broadcast.
You can hear it on the broadcast. That was the part where it's like, "Hey, Jack, go, Jack," and it's like, "Oh no, please, let's go."
And to me, I mean, in those moments, I had another moment like that earlier in the season. You feel just so isolated, and you're so disappointed in yourself, and you feel like I don't know, you work so hard, you have such high expectations. You're your biggest critic as well. And so I was really down on myself, and I was like, you know what? To use, my football experiences, you know what I mean? I was like, you got to respond to adversity. And I ended up a really cool interview. The second period report and the interviews during intermission, they were all right. You know what I mean? I was kind of getting my footing back under me, and I decided to put my foot down and not waste these last opportunities of the year on camera. I had a really cool interview with the Naked Five up in the student section that I really was proud of, and then I thought I did a good job on my post-game interview with Coach Barr before they go to the TD Garden on Friday. So I think that's probably – it was really cool to see the growth, you know what I mean, within myself and be able to respond to adversity, not get down on myself and respond,
Yeah. The only thing I would quickly add is, like, in the future, and this is just my advice, when that situation you mentioned where, everything goes quiet and you're talking – when I was taught, it's like, you just keep going. Your job is to entertain the people on TV. Yes, it's going to be a little awkward for you. It's going to be awkward for the people that are next to you, but it's even more awkward for the people on TV because they don't know what's going on. So it's just like you said, it just takes a little bit. You got to be like, okay, I'm the only one talking here, but whatever. My focus is on this TV audience that needs to see me. So look, that moment the other day, it was funny to me. I mean, I taped it, sent it around because I thought it was funny, because it's just like, you just don't know that helpless feeling when you're not right next to the camera person that could say, hey, you're on, or whatever, point at you, and they're far away, especially in the Alphon, which must have been crazy. And wow. I think Zach's going to ask you about Maine hockey right now, because even though as a BU fan, I could see that those people were nuts the last few weeks.
For sure. All right, so earlier in this episode, Jeff and I were talking about this UMaine ice hockey team this year, how it had a great year, really shown out, a lot of great performances. I mean, we're trying to come up with what is so special about this team. And I was thinking, we're interviewing Jack. Like, he's been with this team all year. I got to ask him. So can you just talk about what about this team really stands out to you? Whether or not they beat you this weekend, and
they're not going to,
or whether or not I can say confidently now they are guaranteed a spot in the NCAA tournament. They've guaranteed that spot. So, but whether or not they succeed or they win a championship or not, can you talk about what's been so special about a team like this and how Coach Barr has built up this program?
Yeah, Zach, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to cough in your.
No, you're all good.
I just got to grab this water real quick. Of course, the wrong time. I got a little tickle in my throat, right? No, but I think the funniest thing ever is you look at the lineup cards, right? The lineup sheets before every game. You see any Hockey East team, draft pick. Maine Black Bears come to town, 1 draft pick. Brad Nadeau, first round, Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, tremendous talent. First team. All Hockey East rookie, you know what I mean? All rookie team. But I think where they really succeed is they have a bunch of guys, and we talk about it with Coach Barr pregame all the time, who came in as walk-ons and have made themselves these players who are, starter caliber players in the Hockey East coming in as a walk-on. And I think they play with that chip on their shoulder, and they outwork these teams who have all the draft picks. Maybe that's not the foundation of their game. Is just being tough and gritty and outworking other teams. The first person I think of when I think of Maine hockey right now is this kid, Harrison Scott, center, second-line center from Bentley University. He transferred in. People are like, I don't know what he's going to be. The UNH coach just told us a story about the old Bentley head coach. Even told him, I don't know if he's going to pan out. I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, all conference-level player for them this year. Over 20 points, just having an outstanding season. And then I think of Anthony Calafiore, who I almost said the S word. I crap you not, is probably 5'8", maybe like a 180 soaking wet. You know what I mean? Just a small kid from Staten Island, New York. He got in the lineup in December and has not given a spot back because he just makes those extra effort plays that no one else has. And I think you factor in the talent of the Nadeau brothers, who, if you get a chance to just watch some highlights of them, they just skate around with their stick on the ground because they know in the back of their head they know where the other brother is. It's some of the craziest stuff, some of the craziest plays I've ever seen on a hockey rink is from those two brothers. They turn it into their backyard. They turn it into their backyard pond. It's unbelievable. So I think you mix those two together and you get, the third seed in the Hockey East who's playing in the semifinal. And I just almost, when they went on that little slump where they got swept by UNH, they split a bunch of series. They even split one with Vermont, who was at the bottom of the Hockey East. I think they lost that chip on their shoulder for a little bit. I really think that's what it was for them. And after that Vermont series, they found it. They swept UMass. They throttled UNH at home and got revenge for the weekend sweep when UNH throttled them about a month ago. And I think they're playing good hockey, and they found their identity again for sure.
Tell me about the Alphon. Let's just get this out of the way. Everyone, again, I'm a Hockey East guy. Everyone says, you got to go to the Alphon. The Alphon's different, right? Terrible sight lines for TV. I've never been to a game there. I've been to UMaine a few times, never been to a game there. Tell me what it's like. Again, as a BU fan, a biased BU fan, I watched that UNH game. And look, it's UNH, obviously. They hate UNH. And just like every time they scored a goal, that place went berserk. So what is it? Again, you on social media have showed a lot of the lines for whether it's women's college basketball or hockey, the lines that form earlier in the day. What is it about that space specifically beyond like how good the team is that gives them a lift and is honestly one of the reasons why I think BU is going to win pretty comfortably on Fridays because it's going to be in a big cavernous TD Garden. They're not in the comforts of the Alphon against a very overrated University of No Hardware Wildcat team. But anyway, tell me about the Alphon, and for someone who's never been there, why is it so special?
I just think, and this is something I've really learned from being on the media side, up in Orono, if you give them something to cheer about, you are the only show in town. You know what I mean? Instead of worrying about who are the Patriots going to draft? The Red Sox aren't signing anybody. Instead of your whole fan base community worrying about stuff like that, they're worried about it. But the hottest ticket in town this winter was, we've got battles on Facebook Marketplace. We've got bidding wars, in comment sections amongst families for these tickets. And I think it's strictly because, not just strictly, but a big part because of the location. You know what I mean? You're 4 hours from Boston. Portland, this time of year, the Maine Celtics are having a good season. But I think that's not probably a main attraction for a lot of people within the state. So I think it's the only ticket in town. When they're good, they give you something to cheer about and the history behind it. It's such a legendary program. You know what I mean? It's had so much success in the 90s before and after. And they have a very well-traveled fan base as well. Whenever you see Hockey East away games, you see a blue, baby blue, and navy white, sweater in the crowd. In terms of game day, when people are invested in it and they're having a season like they did this year, we had a 7 o'clock tip one time. 7 o'clock puck drop one time. A kid showed up in the student section line at 1:13 in the afternoon. The dedication of the fans, and especially the students, it's just unmatched, in my opinion, across college hockey. A big part to do with location, but I just think it's a very passionate fan base. And when you're in there, the way that student section's lined up, it is loud. They're right on top of your goalie. And I've seen some of the best goalies in the Hockey East shrink in the first and third periods, being under that student section, just seeing that student section pepper them with chirps and loud noise and all that type of stuff. And the Hockey East coaches don't shy away from it. When they swept Providence, split with Providence, it was reported on Tuesday in Providence they were pumping crowd noise into the arena during practice because they knew what was coming. And I think it definitely affected them on Friday. Now, I will accuse the Maine fans. Sometimes when they get a win on Friday, those students, they shy away from Saturday night a little bit. It won't be as full.
It's a lot happening on the campus on Saturday nights.
No, that's very true. That is very true. But I think the location, being the only show in town, as well as just the passion of the fan base, it seriously is the best fan base in college hockey. It's unbelievable.
And it's good for them to be good. Like, as a college hockey fan, like when Maine's good, they should at least be decent. They've had some bad years recently, and it's been tough to see. And I mentioned with Zach earlier, I think a lot of the fact of the way college hockey is changing, you have a lot more Canadians coming to UMaine. You got a lot more, it's like 4 Swedes on the team or something like that. So all those kind of things I think will help the program. So I think they are on the up and up. Again, I think they, they're going to run into a big, really good team on Friday night. We'll see what happens. Of course, I think BU will win. But in the tournament, they could certainly, again, Hockey East, I think, is by far the best conference this year. So if they go up against a team from the Midwest, I could certainly give them a chance, to make a make a little splash in their bracket. They'll probably get sent out west probably for the NCAA tournament, but anything could happen. And it should be a great game on Friday night. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, well, two things. Just to get back to what I was talking about, where their identity and who they are and the type of players they have. And you talk about the Swedes, Alvin Boya starting over Victor Osman is one of the major storylines of the season. Victor's a great dude, great goaltender. Alvin Boya was like a late addition to this team. He got here in like August. He wasn't part of that main recruiting class. He got here late. Next thing you know, this kid is one of the best goalies in the Hockey East as a true freshman. You know what I mean? It's stories like that of why they're so good this year. And I think you got a really good point there, Jeff, in terms of this experience for them playing in a neutral site. They certainly benefit from the Alphon tremendously. And I think, if anything, this game against BU is going to at least give them that experience for the neutral sites in the NCAA tournament. So I think if you get, even say, in the event, obviously, hopefully, as a Maine fan, I'm hoping, they come out with a strong game and get the win. But if anything, this at least gives you an experience. Staying overnight in the city you don't normally play in often. They didn't have a lot of games in Boston this year. Go into an arena you never really played in before. They'll at least have that experience going into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So I was just about to ask, before we go into some March Madness, I want to hear the score predictions, because clearly Jeff thinks that they're going to run into a wall with BU. I think you're underestimating Maine's ability. I know I mentioned this to you before. We talked about it early in the episode how they split the season series with BU, but and you said, "Oh, it's not a big deal. It's regular season." I don't remember exactly what you said, but you seemed to just kind of shy away. So, Jeff, kind of justify a score prediction, and Jack, I want to hear what you have to think about this game.
It's going to be 5-2 BU, and I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout. Like, I think it's going to be BU's going to control the game, and they may get an empty netter or two in the end. I think. Look, Boston University, their Achilles heels are goaltending. When you look at their losses this year, it's been high scoring, overtime losses mostly, to be honest. That loss to get in the Beanpot final against Northeastern was unbelievably poor. They had that game in the bag. They had some really bad goaltending in that game. Should have won that one. I was at the BC game at BU that they got swept that weekend. Again, goaltending was a little bit suspect there. So I think, look, you have Celebrini. You have just so many offensive weapons for BU. You have the Hudson brothers. I think BU goes out 2-0 after the first period. Maine comes back, maybe makes it 2-1, 2-2. But in the end, I just think there's too much firepower on that BU team. They're gunning for a number one seed. They're pretty much locked into a number one. But I'd like to see them get as high as possible to try to stay as close to home. So 5-2. I would be shocked if this game was 1-0 or even 2-1, either way, Maine or BU. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. These teams are going to be flying around the ice. It's the late game, I believe, too. So they'll be chomping at the bit as long as that first game doesn't go very, very long. And I don't think it will, because I think Boston College will spank.
Yeah, so I think you have all the credit. I mean, all the credit in the world to say that. You know what I mean? Because it's been BC, BU, everybody else this year. And that's just the reality of college hockey. I think if Maine can benefit maybe from a not locked in BU goaltender and play their brand of hockey to the best of their ability, I think Maine has a shot to win a 3-2 game, maybe a 4-3 game, because they've shown they can put the puck in the net. 5-0 against UNH is definitely not nothing to roll your eyes at. You know what I mean? And just pass over and ignore. But BU's got the upper hand without a doubt. And the thing I worry about Maine in these upcoming weeks with tournament play like this, a lot of the generation of the offense and stuff, yeah, they've got really good older leadership from guys like Lyndon Breen, Donovan Houle, Ben Poisson, but the guys who are putting the puck in the net are the freshmen. You know what I mean? The guy who's stopping all the pucks is a freshman. I'm interested to see how they play under these bright lights, because you get a home game at the Alphon. It felt like a playoff game, but that wasn't anything different than what they've seen all year in terms of adjusting to the Hockey East playoffs. Like you said, this is going to be a neutral environment. It's going to be a jam-packed. You talk about BC, BU, UMass, and Maine, all great fan bases, all have had a lot of success in the history of college hockey. It's going to be jam-packed. And so it's going to be interesting to see how these freshmen do. If they can hold their own, I could see it being a one-goal game either way.
Now, UMaine, I would say if I'm UMaine, I'm looking at the games that BU played against Northeastern because you look at how BC played. They're incredible. They have unbelievable talent. You look at Northeastern, not a great talented team, but every time they played BU, even in the playoffs last weekend, it was not easy. And I was like, here we go again. So that's the kind of game you need to play against BU. To win the game. Again, I think BC will take care of business. Are you going to be able to go? Because we have the football ring ceremony Friday night, so I won't be able to go. Yeah, so I'll have to watch on TV.
That's always
good excuse not to go, but
no doubt. Yeah, I actually I'm lucky enough for the ticket. I'm going to grab some sound, and I said screw it and applied for a media pass and got one.
Nice.
So I'm fired up. Yeah, they said you get to go in the media tunnel there at I mean, I'm going to be
catered. Is it catered? Huh?
I hope at least free water.
For sure.
To try to improve my chances, I clicked no on the press box though. So I'm going to be able to get in the pressers. I'm not going to try to overstep any boundaries. Right. Wander around, find a seat, enjoy the game. Go get some sound for the radio station at the press box, and just enjoy the games. But I'm fired. Walking through that tunnel is gonna, instead of like the main entrance, is going to be. It's going to be like cool. A school kid. It's going to be great.
If you do get catered, you take some pictures, put in the group chat. So that's always that. We want to talk about the main women's basketball team as well. You obviously covered them quite a bit. A great run. Coach Amy Vachon has done such an incredible job. If you think how many years ago that we had the end of the Cindy Blodgett era, was just as great as a player she was, it just did not work out as a coach at UMaine, and the program is kind of in the mud. And obviously you're seeing it on the men's side as well. They've improved significantly, but what about this women's team? And was it the semifinal that they were in trouble? Like they were not looking so hot in the semifinal. Came back to win that game, obviously, and now they're facing some really good competition in March Madness. So what about that women's team that you see, not just like their play on the court, but what you're seeing for Coach Vachon, which everyone seems to be really high on this team going forward, that they could be the kind of the queens of America East for a while.
Yeah, I cannot say enough good things about that coaching staff and what they've been able to do. And I think where you see that is not just the success on the court, but the way they've kept the team together. You know what I mean? In terms of all this turmoil and all this changeover, all this change that's going on in college sports, college basketball, people entering the transfer portal, all this different stuff, their teams remain intact and their teams remain happy, locked in, focused. And I think you see the same thing with Vermont. You know what I mean? Men's basketball. Anytime you see a program right now in this day and age who's able to keep it all together, stay connected, still have a great culture that they have, I think it's a testament to the staff and the players they bring in. They're so meticulous with who they're just not letting anyone walk through the door. You know what I mean? Trust me, it's much easier, right? With that smaller team, you're only taking maybe a player to 3 in a recruiting class. So it makes it a little easier in that sense. But they've really found players with the right fit. They just play so well as a team. You got, I like to call them Player of the Year A and Player of the Year B in Simon and Smith. It could have gone to either one of them. I mean, Smith puts up a double-double a game. You know what I mean? Simon has had multiple 30-plus point games. I think she put, 30 on Indiana, something like that. That was a long time ago. I don't necessarily remember the exact stat line. But even with all that, they play so well as a team. They really care about each other. They move the ball flawlessly, and it got sketchy. Not only the semifinal game, the quarterfinal to UMass Lowell, the 1 seed. I remember talking to the coach, UMass Lowell's coach at the beginning of the game. She's like, we're confident. We think we can play with anybody. You know what I mean? I was like, okay. You know what I mean? I kind of, in the game worked out where for 3 quarters, UMass Lowell was taking it to them, and I think they finally settled in. And same with that Binghamton game. Binghamton had them dead to rights, to be completely honest. It took a crazy end of third quarter into the fourth quarter run from UMaine and Ann Simon to spark the pit, and they were just kind of playing tight. It's almost like they knew, especially with Ann Simon's senior year, they knew this was the year. They knew this was the year. They have to do it. They got to take advantage of this opportunity. And I think they definitely came into those first 2 games a little tight. And then I don't know if you guys were able to watch any of that America East Championship. They exploded. There was any of the hesitation. Like in that game, in those first 2 games, people were kind of hesitant to make moves on offense. There were mistakes being made on defense. They were kind of, uptight. That Vermont game, they were just playing ball like they had the whole year. They were rolling. It was great to see. And I think in those moments, they just fell back to their level of training. You know what I mean? And all the work they put in together. We're talking about a team. I tweeted out earlier this week that we get out of football activities at like 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday night. I mean, I'm the whole day I'm thinking about football. I got to get home, eat some wings, watch football. They're in the gym putting up shots on one of those rebounder machines. You know what I mean? They're constantly working on their game, working together. And I think that's why they've had so much success.
Last question on this topic before we move on is, women's college basketball has probably never been more popular than it has been this year, and a lot of it's obviously because of Caitlin Clark and some of the other top teams, but specifically her kind of bringing a lot of fans eyeballs to it. Do you ever notice at this level, not being a top 10 team, do you notice a little bit more excitement than usual? Not just because the team's good, but do you feel it that a lot more people are like, oh, I've seen that Caitlin Clark girl. Let me go check out a UMaine women's game. Oh, wow, they're really good. Like, what can you notice anything maybe from the students or other people that are there?
You want to know what's funny is I'm actually really glad you asked this, because I noticed it from the rest of the country, instead of noticing it in Maine, because for us, women's basketball has been a big time sport, almost more popular than men in the state of Maine. Maine women's basketball, the University of Maine women's basketball has been so successful over the years. Then state of Maine high school girls basketball pumps out D1 athlete after D1 athlete after D1 athlete. I mean, we've been in on women's college basketball for years as a state. You know what I mean? So to see everyone else get on it, I think that's really cool. I think how it's captivated the nation with Caitlin Clark and with the LSU South Carolina is really cool, and it's really good for sport. But in terms of for the University of Maine, the state of Maine, we've been hip to it. You know what I mean? Like we've had our Mackenzie Holmes. We've had our Emily Espositos, at least in my area. You know what I mean? That's the names I immediately think of, who you just see and are just buckets, and they do it at the next level. The Sydney Blodgetts, the Amy Vachons, going and making history for the university, and then the success of UMaine women's basketball, not just years ago, but the run they're on right now. The fan base up here, outside of hockey, it's the biggest fan base they have is the women's basketball team. And it's been that way. You know what I mean? It's a really interesting dynamic to see the men's basketball team look at the women's program and say, we got to get there. We got to get to that level. And that's something that is reality at University of Maine. And it's not a knock on the men's team whatsoever. What's Coach Markwood, they're all doing a great job. It's the standard is so high from that women's basketball program that the men's basketball team and program just looks at it and they're like, we got to get to that, because that's the potential they have. And Coach Markwood and Coach Gash and company are working towards that, and they're making strides. But I think that's the reality of basketball in Maine, and I think it's really cool to see the rest of the country catch up.
Yeah, it's cool to watch some of those old YouTube videos of when UMaine women, Sydney Blodgett, Joanne Palumbo was the coach. Like they made cause some damage. It's some pretty cool stuff on there.
Zach, you got some homework tonight. You heard that? You got to go watch that.
Yeah. Go watch the podcast.
Before we jump to the next topic, I think it's just important to say, and just to note that even though Maine's going to play Ohio State, that's a really tough matchup. It's really, really, really cool to see Maine in the tournament. It's going to be great for the program. It's great for the school. It's great for the state of Maine. And I'm honestly excited to see it on national television, just to see UMaine in that ticker at the bottom of the screen, with the baby blue next to Ohio State. No matter the score, it's really, really great for the program.
When's the game?
I couldn't agree more, Zach. It's Friday at noon.
Yeah. Friday at noon. Okay. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think the coolest thing was to go on the women's tournament bracket challenge and click Maine all the way through.
Ah, right. Yeah.
National champions. And like that's what people don't understand about what's so cool about Maine. And this is kind of a wild kind of out there, but it's like the same with Cooper Flag. It's so rare in Maine when something like that happens. It's the coolest thing ever. You attach to it. Cooper Flag's got mixtapes now. University of Maine women's basketball. You can click them on the tournament challenge. Stuff like that, where in other states happens all the time. That stuff means something to us Mainers. You know what I mean? That's to be able to do that, click them through, make them national champs was the coolest thing ever. You know what I mean? And I think you make great points there, Zach. It's awesome to just see them involved.
For sure.
Awesome.
So now, I've been waiting to talk about this for a while with you. Walks with Webb. So for those who may not know, Jack started this little segment on Twitter where he would just talk about, rant about, gives insight into whatever he was feeling like talking about. And it caught a lot of attention. I don't know if it was the first or the second one that you did. Got a lot of traction on Twitter, now X. I keep calling it Twitter.
It's Twitter.
But just tell me first of all, like, where this idea came from, what you enjoy about doing it, and will we be getting a spring Walks for Webb episode anytime soon?
You 100% will. I've been, with all the reporting stuff, I've been lacking, and it's something I'm actually disappointed with myself with, because all this hustling I've been doing on this front, in today's day and age where you got to try to do it all, I've been letting this front slack. You know what I mean, in terms of the Walks with Webb stuff. So I'm definitely gonna get back to that. You're gonna see one Friday. Live from Boston, probably giving my take on the Maine win over BU.
We'll see about
but
that.
so it originated. My mentor when I interned with Channel 7 up here, Dave Peck, who I think the world of. He's down at a Hartford station right now doing his thing, covering UConn, things of that nature, doing some news and sports. He has a behind the wheel where he puts his phone behind the driver's side, behind his wheel, and as he's driving, he's just giving commentary. He's a big Pats guy, so a lot of it is about the Pats, sometimes about the Red Sox. And I just saw that, and I was like, there's no reason why I can't be creating my own content like that and putting it out there, because I put a lot of thought into these walks and the ideas that I share, whether they're informational or they're my take on something. I'm not just, like I said earlier, I'm not just out there trying to make a headline, trying to get clicks, grab clicks for a clip on TikTok or Twitter or something like that. And I just thought, it's a way for me to get my voice out there. And the first one, I'm extremely lucky to have the support I do from friends, family, people I met along the way, and their retweets, grab another like, from someone else's page. And the numbers, to see the first one blow up like it did, it was really cool. You know what I mean? It meant a lot to me. It definitely, I think it had like over 200 likes, which is, the coolest thing ever to see something you've done get recognized like that. But that really is not necessarily for the work I did. I thought it was a good video. I thought it was a good take on the current state of college football. But that was just more credit to, in terms of catching traction, a credit to my friends and family and the support system that I'm so blessed to have. But I think it's a really cool thing to just be able to get reps, and it's practice on camera. You know what I mean? Every day I try to do something, whether it be writing, just look in the mirror and get a rep in. And to be able to push something like that out, because I see Twitter now, honestly, Zach, and I think you see the same thing with the great job you do on there. It's almost like your resume. Why do I need a resume when I can send someone my X link and they can scroll for the way I've covered University of Maine, the videos I put out? Obviously, you still need a resume, stuff like that.
Of course, yeah.
But that's like how I've been viewing it, and that's the kind of stuff I've been trying to put out there. And obviously, I like to keep my tweets casual still, but in terms of if they ever click over to my media side, they'll see stuff I've been doing and that I've been taking seriously. So I think that was just another cool thing, like we talked about earlier, trying to do everything. A way to add my own personal commentary. And I've had a lot of fun with it, you know what I mean? Whether it be kind of just putting a flyer out there, just say, hey, this happened, this is what you need to know, or, my take on the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift stuff, or, a bunch of other things like that. And it's been a super cool thing to do because, like Jeff said earlier, you couldn't do this 10 years ago. I have my own platform that if I want people to hear, no matter if you want to hear it or not, if I want people to hear it, I can send it out there. It's going to be out there whether you click on it or not. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, as we have a couple more questions before we wrap up. Just want to get your quick hits on March Madness for the men's side. Who do you have winning it all? Who do you have as the biggest choker, I guess we'd say the biggest loser? Or do you have a big upset? And lastly, do you have a dark horse, maybe a team that's going to make a deep run that people aren't talking about? What are you thinking?
I'm actually disappointed it's almost over. We could actually, I know the three of us, we could sit here and do this all night.
This won't be the only time. You'll be a recurring guest. You're going to be in that category.
Because this is unbelievable. This is so much fun. But where I was today sitting there texting with my buddies, it's like, one of my buddies, Noah Niles. You guys remember Noah Niles?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He prompted, he said, is this some of the best non-game days of the year, filling out the brackets? And I sat there in hell thinking, no, I got anxiety right now trying to fill out this bracket, looking at all these picks. I'm thinking, okay, UConn, I like UConn. And then I'm picking all these Final Four, and I see a 1 seed, Kentucky at a 3. I put in my Final Four in one bracket, a couple, maybe a 1 or 2 here and there. And then Cam Cataract, if you remember him, first episode of Trojan Talks, like, hey, hate to break it to you guys, but there's been a 5 or higher seed in every Final Four for the past 10 years. And then you look at your bracket, and obviously it's impossible to get it correct, but you're trying. And you look at
what
your bracket,
5 seed, what 7 seed's going to make it? And then you're like, that's so stupid to say that they're going to go to the Final Four, though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And then you sit there and you go, okay, everyone likes James Madison. That's up Wisconsin. Well, if everyone likes it, you know what I mean? I've studied a little bit of gambling stuff. If the public really likes something, maybe it won't happen. Yeah. So just trying to find those upsets wherever they are. I kind of drive myself crazy trying to think of it, but I've been really leaning towards McNeese State. Is it State? Okay. Is it State?
McNeese State. Yep.
Yeah, McNeese State. I kind of like that as a first round upset. It's so hard in terms of, obviously I'm a football guy, so I've really bought into the power of culture and team camaraderie and leadership. And you look at UConn, and they put on display for everyone to see in the Big East tournament that they can win a ball game in so many different ways. They get a shootout with St. John's, I think it was, and then they have a couple rock fights mixed in there, and you see the fiery Dan Hurley on the sideline with his players bought into that mindset. It's almost impossible to bet against them. You know what I mean? But then you look at Purdue, and you're like, okay, Virginia, they lost to a 16 America East 16 seed.
That's right.
Purdue, maybe they could do it. I don't love the way Zach Edey gets officiated, but if it's going to win me some money in a bracket pool or, make my bracket correct, I can get by. Hey, foul them every time. You know what I mean?
And then last year they lost as a 1 seed, right? That it's just when you pick those big upsets, you're just you're worried about looking so stupid. Like I was talking to Cole Purvis today. I think he has New Mexico in the Final Four as like a 7 or a 10 seed. And it's like, okay, but they could easily lose in the first round, and you're like, well, that was dumb. There goes my whole bracket for
But
Cinderella.
then they can make the Final Four and you look like
exactly.
a genius. You know what I mean? It is so much fun. And I mean, I know on Friday I'll be at the Hockey stuff, but I'll have it on a phone.
Oh yeah.
A tablet. I've been lucky enough to go to a couple March Madness games, and the sports world is so funny because every time you think something's over, it's followed by something besides July and August. You know what I mean? July and August, the months suck. Those 2 months in the sports calendar suck. But I mean, this time of year, I'm a big football guy, and it's not that I forget about March Madness, but until you're in it, you know what I mean? And around this time of year, you're like, this is really the best. I mean, these Thursday, Friday.
It's Thursday, Friday. That's really what it is for me. Like I get the games
better.
on my office. Everyone still thinks they're in it. Yeah, and then you just root for your team. I'm a Duke fan. I don't think we're gonna make it out of the weekend. So we'll see what happens.
Jeff, my dog's name is Duke, and I agree with you.
I think they'll beat Vermont, but after that. Nope. I know Zach thinks he's going to lose to Vermont. Just because Nick Fiorella's on the team,
That may be a part of the reason why I say no. But I have Vermont as a big upset. Watch out for Western Kentucky against Marquette.
Okay.
And then my big one is, and this is the whole tournament for me. DJ Burns, NC State. If this guy doesn't burn out, obviously he's been balling out. He's been playing.
Get behind a big dog like that.
If he doesn't burn out, they're going to the Final Four because he is such. Wow. He's an insane player.
I agree with you, and I think to see that's the type of guy I wanted to be when I played high school basketball. A fat guy running up and down the floor, but could just get it done, and that just wasn't me. You know what I mean? But he is exactly in my mind who I wanted to be. You know what I mean? So I can get behind a player like that for sure, and that's the balance. When I think of upsets, I would say if your kind of personality, I guess maybe was, or how you think was the level of your bracket or how you fill it out. I'm one of those guys who, I like to, in my mind, the way I assess things, UConn's better than all these teams. You know what I mean? Houston's better than all these teams. Mm-hmm. That's maybe not, I just got to get more creative. You know what I mean? Maybe that's what it is. I got to think outside the box when it comes to March Madness. And I know that every year by the round of 32, I'm saying to myself, be a little more creative. You know what I mean? Find some new things, predict some upsets. And then every year I find myself, that team's not going to lose. You know what I mean?
It's supposed mostly 1s and 2 seeds in the Elite Eight, right? They always
100%.
Maybe throw in a 3, but it's like, no, most of you're going to have one of those where there's nobody that's lower than a 5, that's
exactly.
Left. It's crazy.
And I think and I guess that's the next level. And then the thing that doesn't help, I truly think is it's almost like the more you know, the worse you are. Cause you listen, I mean, all day today and yesterday, I'm listening to podcasts of these experts who all they do with their lives is watch college basketball. And it's a lot of chalk. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, they almost know too much. You know what I mean? They legit know too much about the sport. They've watched too much of these teams. So there's a lot of chalk coming out of their brackets, and it's just never going to be right. And obviously none of them are ever going to be right, but you got to chase perfection. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, my favorite thing to watch is when some of these celebrities that don't do any research, like Stephen A. Smith did theirs. And I know he got a lot of flack on Twitter because he had 3 first seeds in Texas A&M in the Final Four. And people are like, this guy doesn't watch college basketball. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. But that's my favorite is when these celebrities who they're like, I'm not going to watch it. You know what? I'm just going to make a bracket to make a bracket. And they're like, let me just do it. And they just have these random teams. That's the funniest thing to me.
To your point, though, Zach, I mean, you think about last year's March Madness. What'd you have? What was it? UConn, FAU, Miami, and was it Houston?
So it was something like that. But it's surprising.
Houston, maybe not, but nobody had that. The only way you have that is you don't watch it and you just fill out a bracket. You know what I mean?
And you go to FAU.
Exactly. And that's exactly why it's so great. That's exactly why we all love it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Last question. I know we could talk for hours and definitely have you on back again, but this is one of my favorite questions we're going to ask people here and there. We asked this to Michael Hoffer a few weeks ago. So tomorrow I'm going to make Jack Webb the king, czar, dictator of college sports. There are a lot of great things about college sports. There are a lot of really bad things. For me, I think most of the stuff is turning bad because of money, because of everything else. But I'm making you king and lord of all college sports. You can control the NCAA, the conferences, the rules. If you want to change a rule, what are 3 things that you're doing tomorrow to make college sports a better thing?
The first thing I'm doing is, we talked about earlier, I'm moving everything mid-major to ESPN Plus. Us in the CAA football have this deal with Flow Sports, and it's expensive. You got to go to a whole nother platform, a whole nother streaming service. You guys got to understand, you don't watch a lot of CAA football because you don't have a Flow Sports account. You just straight up don't.
And I'm not going to get one.
Exactly. You're not going to get one. You follow Maine football with the headlines. Maybe you see something on the Twitter page. This, just to let you know, just to bring you in on what CAA football is all about. We call it March Madness because it is some of the most entertaining football there is in the country. Anyone can beat anyone on a given Saturday. High-scoring games, low-scoring games, 4 interception, 4 fumble, 6 touchdown type of games. It's unbelievable, entertaining football. You don't have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't have access to it. So, and I know there's other conferences who deal with the same thing. Meanwhile, you go on a college football Saturday, the NEC, some of these other FCS conferences, they're on ESPN Plus. They're easy accessible. You're scrolling for maybe a middle of a Power 5 game. You run across a Maine game. You'd click on that probably over
Absolutely.
Mississippi State against, I don't know,
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's something I would change. Make all those mid-majors on ESPN Plus. Another thing, I've really been coming around to Jay Billis's contract idea. The more I think about it, the more
enlighten us. I'm not familiar with that so much.
So with all the uncertainty and all the chaos surrounding NIL and the transfer portal, that's something I love my teammates to death at the University of Maine. I truly felt in my heart of hearts, and this happens everywhere. This is not just a Maine thing. This happens all across the country. That I was one of the few people who was there because they just truly love the state and the university. And that's natural. I grew up in Maine. You know what I mean? The Maine kids are obviously going to feel that way. But I think with the way college football is going, that's kind of the mindset of these kids is they don't necessarily invest as much where their feet are. Sometimes, they're worried about the next step, or maybe they're invested where their feet are for a year, and then they peek their head up, you know what I mean, instead of just doubling down. And that's natural because you can't blame the kids because you've had coaches. Unless you're a top 8 program in the country, you're not safe to retaining a head coach. Unless you're one of those premier schools, all these kids have seen. Your University of Washington, you just went to the college football playoff, one of the top 4 teams in the country. You just saw instead of doubling down and building on the success, going into the Big Ten, you just had your coach leave for Alabama because you're not one of those top 8 programs, top 10 programs. You're not safe. So that's why you can't blame the kids because they've watched the higher-ups and coaches do it over and over and break their trust. They bring in a whole set of recruits. Oh, you just got to campus yesterday as a brand-new freshman, 17-year-old recruit? Sorry, buddy, I'm out the door. You know what I mean? And that's not, not every coach is like that. It's a matter of the business. And the way it's set up right now, you can't blame the players for doing it. That's why I think the contract idea in the recruiting process, and this is way more at the higher level, I think about it, because you got these recruits who haven't played a snap of college football getting millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. I think it's either going to end up where bad stuff starts to happen, maybe not bad stuff, but people start investing in it less because they realize they're giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to 17-year-olds and maybe they don't pan out because they're still growing. And like myself, maybe they had a sophomore slump. Maybe they didn't take it as serious. You know what I mean?
Arch Manning, how much money did he make this year? And it's not even a guarantee he's going to start this next year too. And it's not against him, but it's just not good.
Quinn Ewers went to Ohio State, redshirted, cashed in $1 million check and hit the portal. He said, I'm out. He went there for a cup of coffee to enjoy a Big Ten successful Ohio State season and decided, no, it's not for me. So you just wasted, $1 million worth of NIL deal. So, and I think what Jay Billis is talking about is in the recruiting process, instead of signing a national letter of intent, which they all signed for a scholarship, you have a number, a year fixated. And I think being contractually bind like that will make you at least invest in the place. And there's going to be ways to get out of it I'll backtrack. The transfer portal was made to help out people who were not happy in their situation for reasons other than just, I want to be a free agent. I want to see what else is out there. I want, a better money opportunity. It was made for people in bad situations who had a hard time, leaving that programming, finding a new opportunity to get out of that situation. Now it's being used as free agency for the most part. And those people who have those situations are getting drowned out. But that's a whole other conversation we'll get to another time. But you get these guys in contracts, say a basketball player signs a 1-year deal because anything like that. A football player could sign a 3-year deal because that's when you can get drafted. Excuse me. Things of that nature. I think that would help a lot. A third thing, it's tough. Maybe I'm trying to think as a player, like what did I want to change?
Give the Big East more spots in the men's March Madness tournament.
I like that too a lot. The bid Steelers for sure hurt that this year. But I would say maybe like here's a fun one outside the box to appeal to the college kids. Freshman sophomore year, Jack would have really liked this one. Maybe a mandatory day off after your last game of the week. Mandatory, no matter what. Excuse me. A mandatory game off after your last game of the week. So for us, Sunday would be off. We could do whatever we want on a Saturday night after a win. You know what I mean? And you don't have any stress the next day.
That's smart. I mean, coaches, that's one thing coaches could do, but you would decree it and be like, no, you get that off. Yeah, and I can imagine at some of the bigger schools, maybe it's just no option because you really don't have enough time. But, that seems to me like a nice life-work balance, especially, if you're traveling on the road, you don't get back till late, and you have to do some film or lifting the next day or walkthrough or something. It's got to be a little bit of a grind on that front, I can imagine.
We got back one time. We had a 6 p.m. kickoff at New Mexico, so 8 p.m. this time. We got back like 7 a.m. Had to be in there like 3 the next day. Crazy.
Wow.
Not great.
That's wild.
Not great.
And the other thing that the reason it's not like that a lot of times is because there's actual science behind having to work out, get your body moving the day after a Division I college football game, things of that nature. It makes sense, but you know what you said. There's no rules. We don't worry about science. Let the kids have fun. Night after a game.
Definitely.
For sure.
I'd eliminate the college football playoff committee, but that's because I'm a Florida State fan, and that was the biggest bunch of garbage I've ever seen in sport history.
I know we can't get into this, but I'm just gonna say the bowl game that they played, I showed why they should.
That's so short-sighted. We'll talk about that next week. Of course it is.
Okay.
The bowl season is dead.
Ruined.
It's being ruined because and again, you saw it right now with the transfer portal opening already for basketball before this season's already over, which is why teams like St. John's, part of the reason why they're saying we're not going to play because it's not just because we have to get on the recruiting trail, but you talk about, we need to make sure our players are getting, rep time. I love Tom Crean. He had a big rant actually on ESPN about how, if he was still coaching, that they would play in the NIT. Half your roster could be gone, more of that. So like you talk about like, I want to get my guys some experience for next year. Good chance a lot of your guys aren't going to be there next year for one reason or another. So yeah, the NIT, it's tough. It's not good.
And it's not like football where you're test driving your 5-star third string. You know what I mean? That bowl game. You're playing academic walk-on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Jack, we really appreciate your time. We talked for a long time, and we certainly could go for longer. So good luck to UMaine women's basketball this week. Definitely be cheering for them. Can't say the same.
Good luck to the ice hockey team.
I hope they keep it close.
Thank you, Jack.
They're going to run into a 17-year-old phenom that everyone's going to remember the name.
I have to say this because I have to just give.
I know what you're going to say.
Earlier in the episode when we were talking, he forgot who Macklin Celebrini's name.
The best player.
We're going to hold that against him.
It was a brain fart.
I
had that look, looking at the camera like, What's his name? Am I on? What's his name? No, we appreciate your time, Jack. And we'll keep track. You want to give a shout out to your socials so people can follow you on your socials?
At JackieMoon_25. I really appreciate you guys having me on. This is seriously, I love doing this type of stuff. It's so great you guys are doing it. Zach, you're killing it, brother. You just got to keep going, man. Keep working hard.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jack. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we want to thank Jack Webb for coming in. Great conversation as always. Whenever we feel that we have Jack around, whether that was at TA with some of the alumni broadcasts we used to have, or even on this podcast, it's always a great conversation. So we'll thank him for coming in, and we'll probably see him again sometime in the future as well. Always love to talk to him. But now we're going to head into the last part of this episode, which is the take that has nothing to do with sports. And Jeff, I'll let you go first. And I as I look at it now, I think this is a really great take. So go ahead.
Okay, my take. Trust me, it's not about travel anymore. We're done for travel for a while. My take: St. Patrick's Day is the worst holiday on the calendar. That is celebrated by a lot of people. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. First off, green is a gross color. That Kelly green, there's a reason we only wear it once a year. It's just like Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone loves Thanksgiving dinner. There's a reason we only have that dinner once a year, because the food together is kind of average. That green color is hideous, so I don't wear that. Terrible food, by the way. I am not a fan of this boiled dinner, corned beef, boiled cabbage, and all this other stuff. And I know you get some hate on that. Some of my close friends, I won't name them, but that I work with, love St. Patrick's Day dinner. I just not my thing at all. Guinness is disgusting. A beer, I'm not a thick beer fan. Again, if you like thick beer, I'm sure it's great. I had one Guinness my whole life. My 21st birthday, I had an Irish Car Bomb. It was the last one I'll ever have. So I don't like Guinness. And again, this is a lesser thing. It was originally a very religious holiday way back in the Middle Ages, and it's not even close. Like, I know Easter now is one that's a religious holiday, but like, it's about Easter bunnies too, and Christmas as well. Not many people celebrate it as Jesus' birthday, but at least there's some component of some people that still celebrate it as a religious holiday. Now this is just about drinking, and it's like, talk about cultural appropriation. Like, all you talk about is the Irish people just drinking, getting drunk all the time. I hated it in college. I was in Boston. It was like a disaster day. Like, I mean, I enjoyed it my first couple of years. I maybe enjoyed it, but after that, it's like anarchy around the city. But yeah, overall, St. Patrick's Day, it's just something to do between Christmas and the spring, right? It's the only holiday between Valentine's Day and Easter, no matter depending when Easter is. So no, not a fan of St. Patrick's Day. Mostly about the food. I think the food is disgusting. Not a fan, but I like most meat. Corned beef, not one of those, and cabbage and the boiled potatoes. No, I'm sorry, no, not a fan.
Yeah, that's a take that the St. Patrick's when you just said. I think that's something I would have been like, okay, but after what happened to me yesterday, which honestly I'm surprised I didn't just switch my take, because I had this one locked up, but I had to. So my travel from Saco, Maine, all the way down to Hamden, Connecticut. I drive to South Station. I take a train from South Station to New Haven, and then I Uber from New Haven to Hamden. But so my dad dropped me off in South Station yesterday. Spring break was over. I get to South Station, and there's so many people. It's all a bunch of college kids wearing green. I was like, okay, whatever, maybe they're waiting inside for something later. Then I realized, oh, it's probably a bunch of kids. They're taking the T's to Rhode Island or other parts of Massachusetts where their colleges were. It makes sense. You'd want to go to Boston where there's lots of bars and places to go. And the more I walked, I don't know if you've ever been in South Station, but like they have like 8 doors. That's the only way you can get from the tracks to inside. There was maybe 400 kids just waiting right at the doors. And I was like, what are they doing? And I was like, oh, it's just kids being impatient. They want to get on their trains, whatever. But so I was on an AM track, and it comes up on the board. And I'm like, oh, I'll go in and I'll go get my seat, whatever, get on my train. And the police were blocking the doors because kids were being rowdy. And I almost missed my train because kids just want to do whatever and act stupid, and they don't care about anybody else. And I'm trying to be nice. I got like I got a suitcase and a bag, and I'm like, hey guys, excuse me, my train. I got like 5 minutes. Can we move? And they're like, oh, I can't move either. I need to get back to my train. I'm like, your train doesn't leave for 45 minutes. Just go sit back down where all the tables are instead of having to stand up here. And I basically had to bulldoze my way through, and then like say to the cop, like, my train's leaving in 2 minutes. Can you please let me go? Because they were trying to like say nobody's going through. And then I finally got on. But now I hate St. Patrick's Day. I will forever hate St. Patrick's Day after what happened yesterday. And I agree. There's just no. It's just a day to drink, and that's what everybody uses it for. And it's just not a big holiday. I also came up really fast. I had no idea it was yesterday until like 3 days before. It is. But my take is something specific to Maine. So if anybody's listening,
are you going to have a disclaimer on this to begin with?
I will give a disclaimer,
Okay,
and
go
I
for it.
think
Okay.
So for
I don't
our main,
disagree necessarily, but a disclaimer should be said up front of what you're about to say.
yes. So people outside of Maine don't know what this place is. I will market the heck out of it because it's amazing, and if you ever go to Maine, you should go here. But my take is that the greatest seafood restaurant, the total restaurant aspect, is Ken's Seafood Place in Scarborough, Maine, which is in Pine Point. Now, I work at Ken's Seafood. I've worked there for about 5 or 6 years. But this take, I think I'm gonna give thoughts that don't have to do with just like they're not biased. I am a little biased, but not a lot of bias.
Okay.
I think that the big comparison, the big argument is Ken's versus the Clam Bake. The Clam Bake is a huge restaurant. The quality of their food is so low compared to Ken's, and the output of how many orders we do, because we have had workers at Ken's who worked in the Clam Bake in the past. We're doing probably the same amount of orders, and I think the quality of Ken's food is a lot better. Well, I'll ask you your thoughts on this afterwards, but I also think that the experience of Ken's is just really great. The type of food we have where you come up, you come up, you order, you give you a number, you get your number, the food's going out fast. There's great place to sit. It's really nice in that area of Pine Point. And there's a reason why so many people travel from Quebec. They travel from Virginia. We had so many people travel and say, I come up for a day to Maine just to come to this restaurant. The food is incredible. The people are incredible. The service is pretty great. If you get, if I'm the one making your food, it's going to be great. But I guess my question is to you is would you rather go to Ken's or the Clam Bake as a Saco Mainer?
So I would say this: there's a lot of different, and when we say seafood place, we mean like the fried seafood. Like
yes,
you go to a place like Scales in Portland. That's a seafood place that's not on this. We're talking fried Maine seafood, New England seafood. Look, there's a lot of places around. Everyone has their own spot, whether you're down in Kennebunk or Portland. Like we have Ken's, we have Clam Bake, we also have Hewitt's, which is kind of a popular spot down in Camp Ellis here in Saco. I've never been to the Clam Bake. I will say that, never once. I was always a Hewitt's guy. I was always a Hewitt's guy growing up. For me, when I think that the Clam Bake, now the only thing that Clam Bake has over Ken's, location's great in terms of the view. Like you're right on the marsh, like right next to the water.
That's true.
Look, I'll say this: I never was a fan of Ken's growing up, just because we didn't have it. Because the location for me is not as convenient from our house where we live here near the beach. It's a solid 20, 22 minutes, even if you're speeding a little bit. So for doing takeout wasn't an option, and eating in at Ken's can sometimes be a problem because it's so popular. That's a good problem to have. So I would say that my Ken's experience has been 3 to 4 years old. I will say this: the best tartar sauce anywhere I've ever tasted in my whole life.
That's all I want to hear.
The homemade tartar sauce at Ken's. I grew up not even liking tartar sauce. And at Ken's, they give you two choices. They give you the homemade or like the store-bought. The homemade tartar sauce. I mean, the last day of the season, my mom and I went to the last day of the season. I wanted to take like a gallon of sauce home for the winter. Look, I would say incredible. This. I know people who live in Scarborough and in the Gorham area, they love Ken's more than anything else. I grew up doing Hewitt's. Hewitt's has some good stuff too. Like the onion rings at Hewitt's are pretty fantastic. They're like they have like a really weird, in a good way, type of onion ring. The Clam Bake for me, when I think of it, I've never tasted the food. It just seems touristy to me. Like I don't want to go under the cattle call of 300 people sitting there, tourists. Because I worked down on Lowtree Beach for many summers, right down in the square. A lot of fried seafood places down there that were more like walk up and really cheap food, not cheap prices for the tourists. So yeah. I mean, I certainly put Ken's up there. I'm like, if I'm taking if someone came to visit Maine, I'm like, we need to do one seafood place, I'd go to Ken's. And hopefully you're working there, so I get a little extra portion, so don't skip me on my shrimp or scallops. But yeah, the tartar sauce, that's where when I think Ken's, I think, oh my God, that tartar sauce, I have to get it. Even if I'm not getting something that really deserves tartar sauce, always get that. And now my mouth's watering because when are you opening? When's Ken's opening so I can go my first time?
So before I get into the whole like my marketing ad things, I have to do it. You made a great point. When you're looking at like fine dining seafood, there are so many better places than Ken's. I'm not saying Ken's
or lobster. Like Ken's is not a place I'd go get lobster or Hewitt's or Clam Bake.
Of course, there are some fancy restaurants in Portland and Kennebunkport where the seafood is phenomenal. But yeah, and you made the best point. When we're talking about fried seafood, when we're talking about that type of seafood, that it's Ken's. It's got to be Ken's. It's just incredible. Ken's opens up Friday, March 22nd. I'm so mad I can't be there.
Let's go.
But, yep, it's going to be. So In Scarborough, Maine, and Pine Point, if you've never been there, you better go. It's the best seafood in the state of Maine, and it's a great time.
And what's great about that one too, and I can't speak for the other ones, locally owned business, like a local,
Yes.
local guy who employs local kids like you, kids. That's
Teenagers.
what I like, versus some of these other places that were, again, if you want a lobster roll, you go up to the Lobster Shack or you go to downtown Portland, like you're going to get great stuff there. But these places, employ the local kids, and the seafood is fantastic. That fried Maine seafood, that's one thing when I was in Florida, it's not the same.
But yeah, if you come in the summer, you'll see me. I work a lot there, and it's a great
fried
time.
Food for 3 months straight. It's good.
Yeah, but yeah, come to Ken's place because just some great seafood. And you mentioned great. The owner Dave, incredible guy. I cannot shut this guy out enough. He's been an incredible. He's helped me out so much, taught me a lot. Great dude. So definitely come to Ken's. But yeah, I'm really glad about that homemade tartar sauce take because I know so that. Yeah, I remember you when I first started working there. You were skeptical about it. You were like, "Oh, I've never really been there. I won't go." And you finally tried it, and you're like, "This homemade tartar sauce is incredible." I'm like, "What was?" Yep. I told you. I've been telling you for so long.
They must put crack in it. I don't know. Something good.
I won't reveal any secrets though. Those will go with me to the grave on how our food is so good.
Yeah.
But that'll do it for episode number 3 of the Maine Rundown. We want to thank you all for listening, and thanks to Jack Webb again for joining us for a great interview. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram on at the Maine Rundown Pod, and make sure to watch the video version on YouTube. Watch out for some clips and some shorts of the best part of this episode. But for Jeff and myself, we will see you all very, very soon.